Good afternoon. This will be the work session for Marion Council. Today is April 16th. It's 4 p.m. The mayor will not be with us this evening, and Councilwoman Gedalia will be late. So with that, we will continue moving right along. So we have in the presentations the Linn County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Is there anyone here to speak on that this evening? Kasha? Thank you.
I'll introduce Tom Gross is with ECCOG, East Central Iowa Council of Governments. They were the entity that were kind of the consultant for this project. This was ultimately through Linn County, and I'll let Tom explain here, but this is something that the city of Marion has participated in. This is staff participated in these, and many of our first responding agencies have participated in this. Just a little bit of background that staff has seen this, had time to comment, and so
Perfect.
I'll let Tom Gross with ECCOG take it away.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. Tom Gross from ECCOG. So I'm just going to talk a little bit generally about hazard mitigation planning and then cover a few specific details about the current plan that I've worked on. So this is a county-wide Linn County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. It's actually considered a multi-hazard plan too. There are 20 hazards that were covered in the plan, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The reason that we do hazard mitigation plans is to identify projects that communities can implement in order to reduce the negative impacts of future hazard events. More specifically, we do these plans because by participating in them and then ultimately adopting the plan, it'll make Marion eligible to apply for FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance grant funds. So and there's 3 different grants that fall under that umbrella. So this plan, it emphasizes natural hazards, but there is some consideration given to technological and human-caused hazards as well. As Kesha mentioned, it's an update to a previously approved and adopted plan. So that kind of made the planning process a little bit simpler. We had a community meeting for the city of Marion that was attended by staff and a council member. And so there were projects that were revisited from the current plan and then discussion held about if there were any new projects that could be included going forward. So kind of generally, there's 3 main parts to the hazard mitigation plan. The first part is the hazard analysis and risk assessment. That's a county-wide, and what I did was collect data for the 20 hazards that we identified for the plan, which is based on the state hazard mitigation plan, and try to collect any data that we could for those to provide some analysis about the past occurrences, geographic areas where it might occur, and similar aspects that you would want to consider for the hazards. Kind of going off of that work, then each jurisdiction that participates in the plan is able to select their own prioritization for the hazards, where they just identify the ones that they think, kind of based on average of probability, severity, duration, and a couple other factors, what's most important for them to address going forward. So, for example, the committee that got together for Marion for the update to the plan, they decided to put animal, plant, and crop disease, extreme heat, flash flood, infrastructure failure, severe winter storm, thunderstorm, lightning, and hail, and tornado and windstorm as the top priority hazards. So kind of what you would expect for the area. And then after the hazards are prioritized, the next main part of the planning process and for the plan itself is to identify the projects that would be related to those hazards that are identified in the plan. So the committee, and just to provide just a little detail, it was a meeting that was held in January of last year. But when the committee met and went over the strategies from the existing plan and then decided if there were any new projects to add, they ultimately came up with a list of 12 mitigation strategies or projects to include in the plan and to try to include in the plan. And then I just have highlighted a couple examples just to give you an idea of the types of projects that are in there. Purchase and install backup power generators in critical facilities and or replace obsolete generators. Assess outdoor warning siren coverage and expand coverage if needed. Construct 2 new fire stations with the tornado safe room. And where possible, identify and implement projects that complement the flood risk management goal and objectives of the Indian Creek Watershed Management Plan. And that was included because I know the cities are participating in that watershed management authority. Another required part of the plan then is to kind of prioritize those projects and generally describe the benefits and costs for those and identify a responsible party. These projects are kind of like a wish list of things that you want to do if you have funding available. So there's no consequences from not completing a plan, but it's meant to identify things that you would like to address in the community. When a plan is approved, the period is for 5 years. So it might be possible that you need to amend the plan in the future, and that's a possibility. So if there's new vulnerabilities that you discover in your community, it's still possible to go back and revise your mitigation strategy so you can try to work towards reducing the losses from future occurrences. And then just to provide you a little bit of detail about the planning process and where we are now. Every municipality in the county, including the county, and 6 school districts participated in this plan, so there was a lot of interest and participation and support for the plan. I submitted a draft of the plan to Iowa Homeland Security for review on January 18th, and then after their review, they submitted it to FEMA. And shortly thereafter, there was a 30-day public comment period that was held, but no comments were received. And then FEMA approved the plan without requiring any edits to it. So on March 26th, and that was pending adoption from Lynn County, who incidentally adopted the plan the next day. So we're just waiting right now for a revised letter that just shows the plan's approved. So for today, for Marion, like I said, the adoption wouldn't be necessary for the plan to be approved because that's been approved already. The adoption would be so that you are eligible for the hazard mitigation assistance grant programs. So, are there any questions?
Any questions for the council? No. I actually sit on this, and this is it's been very interesting to go through that. So first of all, thank you, and to our city staff members that helped go to write this, because there's a lot of things that sometimes we fail to look at, such as like storm shelters for manufactured areas where those shelters are not available, things that can be built into our infrastructure, such as like the new fire station, Public Works' facility, things like that would be able to help us modify that. So, and that's I'm just pulling bits and pieces out of this thing. This is a huge plan. So again, thanks to all the staff that goes through that, and as well your area as well. So clearly, if there was no edits to it when it came back. You must be an excellent writer. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I submitted another one recently, so there are just a couple edits for that. So I had a little kind of advance warning about things that need
Perfect,
addressed.
thank you. So it kind of mirrors some of the other things that our city already works on, our CIPs and budgets and things like that. So that's a nice wish list for us to be looking at as we move down the road here for the future. So any questions from the council at this point before we proceed? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, I want to make sure we don't have a proclamation today, do we? Chief Crable, please.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to real quick let the council know that Kesha deserves a lot of credit in this. She did a lot of work on this plan, and she deserves a lot of the credit. So that's all I just wanted the council to know. Thank you.
After Tom. He wrote it, I just commented at length.
Team effort.
Those little crib notes in there. Thank you, and thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate it and echo that as well. So I just want to make sure we didn't have a proclamation today. That will be scheduled for Thursday. Is that right? Okay, very good. Moving on to the next item, this will be a presentation by Kara and Stephen, Kara Hammond and Stephen Spears.
Yes, I just wanted to, you've done introductions as well. I just wanted to say that I'd kind of be the point person that Kara originally reached out to. We've brought in Mike Barklow as well, so staff has been involved with this as well. And I wrote a brief memo on it, kind of explaining it, but I'll let them explain it and their wealth of knowledge of this program further.
Perfect. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm Steve Spears. I'm an assistant professor in urban and regional planning at the University of Iowa.
And I'm Kara Hammond, and I'm faculty in the College of Public Health at University of Iowa.
Yeah, for the last 2 years, we've been doing a project in the Cedar Rapids area really aimed at modeling bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and it's been supported by the Corridor MPO and the Iowa DOT through their Transportation Safety Improvement Program. And so basically the way it works is we've been going around to different roadway types in the region and taking counts and then going back and doing some mathematical modeling on that. And part of it is that we've done these temporary counts that last about a week, and then we have one site that we've been doing permanent counts down in on the Cedar Lake area on a trail in Cedar Rapids. And we've been running that for about almost a year and a half now, and we've gotten about, 150,000 bicycle counts and maybe 70,000 pedestrian counts in the time we've been out there. And we wanted to expand that program, and we have two places that we'd like to do it, and one of them is here in Marion, the other is in downtown Cedar Rapids. And what we're trying to do is pick some places that are important in terms of regional connections for bicycles and pedestrians. And working with Kesha, we identified basically right here in front of City Hall as a place that connects, the development of uptown Marion and then also the connections into the Grant Wood and the Seymour Trail are a logical location for us to have a permanent counter that would be available for you guys and for us to use as researchers. So what we're asking for in this proposal is approval to install this on 6th Avenue. We've given you a map to see that. The system basically is an infrared sensor for pedestrians that points toward the sidewalk, and then loop detectors like you would have for vehicles at a traffic light on the street that detects bicycles only. And so that's the basic setup of the system. We've attached a couple of photos of how it works to the proposal, and I don't know, that's about it, unless you have something else to add.
Yeah, and I have hard copies if anyone wants to see, like what was in your packet. Does anyone want a copy of it?
We've got it.
You got it? Okay.
We actually have that, and thank you. Kesha, could we get the overhead projector turned on? I know she was very patiently waiting to see if something would pop up for us there, but just for the public's benefit, I would appreciate that. Thanks.
You can put it, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know. Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah, so here's City Hall. So it's literally right here in front, right out front. And it'll go straight across, so there'll be, like Steve said, infrared counters that point toward the sidewalk to capture pedestrians, and then loops in the street for bicycles. And so the overarching goal of doing this program, like doing all these counts, is to really try to do a couple things. Try to see how much travel there is among bicyclists and people walking, but also so we can see how are things changing over time. Are there more people biking and walking? But then we also want to be able to look at how safety is changing. So with motor vehicles, there are programs where we count vehicle miles traveled every year, but we don't have the equivalent of that for bicycles and pedestrians. We don't know how many miles bicycles travel or how many miles people walk. So we don't have the denominator to calculate rates of crashes and injuries. And so that's really the goal of this program, is to get that denominator data so we can calculate how many injuries, how many crashes there are per miles walked or per miles biked. And then we can track that over time to see, are we improving, are we getting worse, and are there things we can do to intervene to make things better if they are getting worse.
Yeah. The other thing we've been doing in addition to that is looking at when there's infrastructure improvements, what happens before and after those improvements. We've had several areas in Cedar Rapids where we've had bike lanes, for instance, that have been installed. So we do a count before the bike lanes are in, and we do a count after, and we would hope similar things would happen here with this site in terms of trail connections and those sorts of things. You'd be able to see, how the use evolves over time based on how it's connected into the regional network or how destinations pop up in the area that people want to go to by biking or walking.
And another thing, although it's not central to what we've been doing, but another usefulness of the data would be to look at economic impacts. So you can look at the investments you've made in infrastructure or business and see if that's driving traffic, at least from these modes.
Yeah. And in terms of data, the data is essentially uploaded to the cloud, and so we have a website essentially that we use, and Corridor MPO has had access to that for a while because they've had their permanent counter, and you guys would have the same thing, just access to all of that, basically all the count data we've been doing in the region that's associated with this set of counters. So you could also use that data as you wish.
Yeah.
We had a few last year, 1 week counts that we did on streets in Marion. There were maybe 2 or 3, I think, sites that we did last time, and maybe 1 or 2 that we'll do this time in addition to this request.
And just to reiterate, we have funding from the Iowa DOT, a Transportation Safety Improvement Grant, to purchase the equipment. So this wouldn't be a cost to you. It's about $10,000 worth of equipment. Yeah.
10,000.
Yeah. Yep. So we're hoping that you see this as value added.
And the only real maintenance associated with that is that we're just actually about to buy a battery for the one down in Cedar Rapids, and it's about
$150 every 2
2
years to make sure the batteries keep running. So it's a low maintenance or continuing maintenance cost.
And the one that we just had, and we were concerned about, the harsh winter that we had, and the plow. They do plow on the trails and everything, and we just got the data the other day, and it looks great for the whole winter. It'll read when the snow is on the ground. It will read,
when there's a polar vortex, it still works.
So we've been very happy with the system that we've got in Cedar Rapids, and the company that we have purchased this from has expanded a lot, and they do a lot really worldwide. It's a French company, but their U.S. or their North American group is based out of Quebec. I don't remember, somewhere in Canada. Yeah. But they've been working with other locations in Iowa as well. I think they've done some work with Des Moines, and the folks here at Corridor MPO have bought some of their equipment as well.
So, yeah, I think that kind of sums up everything. If you have questions, we'd be happy to answer, or comments.
Just a quick question. How many years is it going to take before you have some valid data trends that you can determine some trends for?
This will integrate into what we've already been doing for the region, and we already have models that are giving us estimates. It's really just a matter of the more data, the more precise it will be. So we can immediately plug it in and have regional estimates. It'll just get better over time. It's hard to say, it'll take exact number.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the site, it's because you have seasonality in bicycle and pedestrian traffic. It's good to have a year of data, so you can see how it changes over time. You can really see it in the Cedar Rapids data. You can see certain days when it's very nice that you have a big spike in traffic, and then it goes back down again. And you can look at it. We've looked at the data before and said, oh well, that looks like there might be something wrong, and then we realized, oh, it was 75 degrees and sunny on a day when days on either side of it were 35 and not sunny. So a year of data is good to have, but as Kara said, we have more than a year and a half of data that we can draw from, and you guys obviously would have access to that once you have access to that website.
Yeah, you'd have access to not just data from that site, but all of the counts.
I'm assuming we picked that road or that spot because of the significant increased traffic that may be there hopefully in about another year.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we talked with Kesha, and because our original idea was on the, what is the 7th, on 7th, but
Yeah.
then in talking with her, she said there'll be changes, and the idea is to reroute bicyclists
Right.
specifically kind of in front of here, and that's why
Yep.
we thought that would be a better choice.
Okay.
I guess I'm confused on what exactly is getting installed. I mean, is it this pole that's in the picture? Are you tearing up the road and putting new concrete down with this
So
loop thing?
it would just require cuts in the pavement to put the little
Loop detectors,
loop
essentially.
detectors,
A saw cut in the surface of the
saw
pavement.
cut.
And then the bollard, it's almost a,
Right.
looks like a standard bollard has a few holes in it for the sensor for the pedestrians, but it looks like, any other bollard you would see, a metal bollard. They're actually made out of plastic, but they're, I think we can get them in a couple different colors, black and gray, and there's one other color too, I think.
Yeah.
Is it all concrete right here, or is there any bricks?
There's some tree beds in there, and so that was kind of the plan, was to put it next to one of the tree beds up next to the curb, and that way there'd be minimal. They could basically just cut through the curb to get the lines out into the street.
Gotcha. I mean, so the street, there's no bricks, it's all concrete.
It's all concrete in the
I can't
street.
remember how many times I walk on that now, I can't think of it. I parked right there.
We tried to avoid any of the areas on the street that had the pavers, obviously, and so the concrete section will work.
Yeah.
Better.
Exciting, right, that you've chosen Marion for this. I wanted to clarify, so there's no installation costs for us? Everything is covered by this grant?
Well, that is one part. We don't have we would do everything except the saw cuts.
Okay.
That's the one part we don't have budgeted. And so.
Yeah, in
You
the
wanna
past
say?
when we did Cedar Rapids, we just had their crew come out with a saw and cut for us.
Right. So.
And we did the installation. That would be the ideal situation if we could do that. I don't know if
Yeah.
we could work with the city to do that or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't talked to public service yet to see if they have that equipment. Otherwise, it'd be something where we hire somebody to come do it if we need to.
Yeah.
Ryan just stepped out, so.
So there is an installation cost, we just don't know what it is at this point. Is that right?
It'd be pretty minor.
Okay.
This will also help, though, as we continue to build trails to show that that trail funding needs to stay there. And so that'll help us get additional funding as well. So it's going to more than offset it.
Sure, I can recognize the value as I started the conversation with, this is exciting.
Yep.
I'm glad that you picked Marion, right? This is great, we'll have access to that data, which I can see a lot of benefit. Just was curious if the installation cost was a part of it, and it's
We
not.
think
so.
we think it would be minimal even if we'd have to hire a contractor to do it. We just
I
don't.
can get with Ryan before Thursday and get that number.
That'd be great,
And
thank you.
another thing I just want to mention that, like a future option, so this company where the equipment comes from, they also have options where you can have, I don't know if you've ever seen in a city where there's actually like a stand and it has a digital sign and it shows like how many people have gone by. We can add that later if that would be of interest to you. It's kind of neat. I mean, just maybe to encourage more cycling and walking.
Maybe later on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could be added at any point, so I just want to let you know that is something that they offer.
Your talking point.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. As our city continues to build out, and obviously we talked about our trails and all of our new routes and roads, this is a huge tool that can be used for multiple things. So that's great collaboration for a lot of those. So thank you very much, Karen and Stephen, for bringing this information to us. Any final questions for these folks? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
At this time, we're going to move into the consent agenda as we go into the work session portion here. The next item that's going to be highlighted will be item number 8. Are there any questions from the council, though, on items 1 through 7 under the administration services? Seeing none, we'll move right to number 8. So motion directing staff to solicit a request for qualifications regarding comprehensive strategic planning. So I'll let whoever wants to take that topic.
Yeah, so we're very excited to be at the point now where we can move forward with a process for a new strategic plan. You should all have received the request for qualifications in your packet, and we're really seeking comprehensive services. We want to go deeper this year than we have in the past, and really end up with kind of clearly defined goals and objectives that we can operationalize into the work plans. And we're really wanting this to be a plan that will be relevant for 3 to 5 years. The operational level, getting that strategic plan down to the operational level is not something that we've done previously with strategic plans, and so we're really, really excited to make that connection. And so something that we're asking of the consultant is to provide us with a roadmap for how we can operationalize that, and not only initially, but over the 3 to 5 year lifespan of this plan, how can we keep that updated so that we have those connections with our actual work plans from year to year. So we didn't get too prescriptive with what specifically we're asking for. I know that there's a lot of models out there for strategic planning, so we wanted to kind of see what the breadth of possibilities are to be able to choose what was best for the city. But just a couple of things that we are saying that we would like are for the data gathering process that leads up to strategic planning to be highly inclusive of all levels of the organization, including stakeholders that might be external. We just really feel that that will allow for better buy-in, for validation of the collective goals that we land on, and then also to ensure that we're not missing anything. It'll be probably a refined group that we'll be working with the consultant for to determine who that will be for the actual on-site facilitation itself. So aside from that, if you can kind of flip through, you'll see that the date that we're contemplating bringing this back to council, if all goes according to schedule, is in late June. So we don't know exactly what dates they'll be available, but you'll have a contract by then. Have any questions?
Quick one.
Yes, Mr. Jensen.
So Amanda, when we talk about a strategic plan, are we talking about the narrative aspect as well as the financial aspect?
Yeah, that'll all go into
So
it.
both really combined together, which will be for the first time ever.
Yep, yeah,
Right?
the budget needs
Perfect.
to talk to the strategic plan.
Okay, so both are really pulling together a firm that can work on both sides.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Draper?
I have one item, and I'm sorry to go back, but I'd like to back up to item number 4. And Mike, I know is going to be hard pressed to replace a park board member that's been with him for, good Lord, I don't know how many years. And
Long time.
so that's a real loss to our park board, but I know he's not in real good health, but
Yep,
I'd
it's,
like to thank him for his service.
definitely we'll do that. With Terry resigning from the board, I mean, there's a huge amount of knowledge that we'll be losing there with his guidance over the years on the board and helping with the vision of what you see today in the Parks and Rec department. I know personally he's been a mentor for me, helped in my overall development as a director of the department. It's been great over the years working hand in hand with Terry, and I can tell you personally and also on behalf of the park board and my staff, Terry will be greatly missed as a member of our board.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out, Paul. We'll go back to the item on the fiscal, for the RFQ. Were there any additional questions for Amanda on that topic? I think we're all, at least I'm as well, I want to echo the same thing from Steve, kind of excited to see us move in that direction. We'll be able to pull the CIP, pull the budgets, and have something now that can somewhat work in tandem or triple action there to help us navigate through that. So I personally will be excited to look forward to that as well too. Seeing no other questions on that particular topic, I am going to back up as one too. There's one question I wanted to follow up on. That was the fiscal year 2019 quarter 4 delinquent fee special assessments for the newer council members. I'm not sure who wants to address this, Lon, if that'd be you, or Rachel, you want to just talk about that? These are assessments that are past due to the city, and could you just tell us what it is that will we be taking action on this, and what that is again?
Yep, so this is a quarterly process. I compile all the past due invoices that are over 30 days past due. After council approves the list, we send notice to these property owners. They have 30 days to pay the city. If they do not pay, it is sent to the county, and they put it on their property tax bill. So the money is collected via property tax.
Okay, thank you. So just for clarification, so once they've been notified, if it hasn't been taken care of, it automatically moves then to their property taxes, and then are they removed off this list? It's not a concurring list, is it?
Correct.
Okay,
so
very
each
good.
quarter, you'll see a new list.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Any other questions in that particular section of the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. This will take us to the public services section. We have nothing start in this area, and our representation has left. We'll move on then to public safety. Anything in this public safety anybody would like to question? Seeing none, we'll move on. We're up to parks. Mike, that puts you back on the spot, sir.
That seemed blurry to you guys?
I thought it was my glasses.
Oh, there. I'm not the best one to judge, so. The first item that we had started under parks today was a receive and file, and it's basically a request from Lynn County Conservation associated with their application for a CAT grant for a project that they're doing at Morgan Creek. A request within their letter to City Council was a resolution of support for the project, and they had also indicated a project donation, and if the City Council wanted to consider that associated with the letter that they had submitted also. So what we would have on Thursday's council meeting would be the resolution of support, and if the City Council wanted to consider some type of donation associated with that project, then we would need to have that number included in or another resolution added to that. So I don't know, Lon, if you had any thoughts on donation for that CAT application.
Yeah, I had discussed this individually with several of the city council members, and the going in for a CAT application, they really do like to see funding from multiple jurisdictions on that. In the past, Lynn County and Lynn County Conservation have participated in projects with Marion, but when I look at it, there are layers of jurisdiction there. Every citizen of Marion is a citizen of Lynn County, and the opposite is not true. My thought on it was that we would extend a resolution of support, and then without a donation, and then if it goes in and the CAT board says we want to see additional contributions from other local entities, that we would consider it at that time. It's just fair warning, it is not uncommon for them to do that.
What is usually the turnaround time on that? So when applications being submitted, it shows support, and then if there was to be some type of communication coming back, what would be the timeline on that, Mike?
Well, it all depends. Just depends on, I mean, the CAT process is lengthy. So depending on all the projects that they're looking at, if they have requests for more information, all those things associated with it, it could take several months before they would get an answer. It's a little hard to pin that one down.
And I understand the donations, if any, that potentially could come out of something like this. I mean, there's all kinds of different allocations and buckets that could be considered, so just something that we could consider, obviously, in the future, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that at the time that, that the request would come back for that actual monetary donation, then we'd have to kind of circle the wagons and see, which bucket that would pull from.
Sure. Sounds like a great project. Any questions for Mike on this particular topic? Or any additional information needed?
The next item that I had was another receive and file item, and that's we put together the annual work program for our parks operation, forestry, and to some extent the recreation staff. So in the council packet this week, we did provide you with a copy of that plan. I just wanted to do a quick review. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into that plan. If there's any question that a council member would have, feel free to contact me at the office, and I'll walk you through the section of the plan that you're interested in. Just first, I wanted just to talk a little bit about the staffing that we have in place now in parks and in recreation and in urban forestry, just to give an update there. Overall, on the operations side, we have 26 employees. 9 of those are full-time assigned to operation. We currently have 4 permanent part-time employees also on the operations side. One of those permanent part-time employees will be assigned to horticulture and will be our lead person moving forward doing that. Individual's name is Kristen Wheatley-Willimack. You might have met her. She's very ambitious and is involved in a lot of community efforts in the community. Great to have her on board. We will also have 2 seasonal employees that will work with Kristen throughout the season to help maintain the flower beds throughout the city. This is a switch from what we've done in recent years, which we did all our flower bed maintenance and care under contract. Went away from that this past, our last summer. Finished out the season with our operations staff, so thought, we needed to bring someone with the experience back into the department to do that, so we'll do that in-house this year. Looking forward to working with Kristen. She's got a lot of great new, fresh ideas, and that's always good to bring those things forward into the department. In addition, we'll have 13 additional seasonal staff. That's a mix of what we consider a full-time seasonal that works a 6-month period, and then we round that out with typically college-age students that they'll work somewhere between a 2 to 2.5 month period over the summer. Those individuals are assigned to mowing and then just general park maintenance are the type of things that they do. Then in the rec side of things, we have 3 full-time employees. One's administrative, and then 2 with Carleen Hummel, Tony Ireland, just handling pool and rec activities for the department. We usually hire in about anywhere from 8 to 12 seasonal employees, just working on the rec side, helping to assist with rec programs. And that also includes staffing our concession stands, something that we're going to mix up a little bit this year. From past years, we've done concessions at the swimming pool under contract. The individuals that were doing the contract last year no longer wanted to continue that. We could not find someone that wanted to take that over, so we'll be doing concessions at the pool this year with our own staff. Along with the pool, typically our pool will operate with about 45 seasonal employees. That includes swim lesson instructors, swim team instructors, our lifeguards, our cashiers, all those rounded up. We come up with about 45 for that. Then on the urban forestry side, currently we have 2 full-time employees, and then we'll float our operations staff over there as needed to assist with their objectives. We will In the FY20 budget, we will be adding one more full-time employee to the urban forestry side of things. I always say that they're a small group, but they're a mighty group in what they get done over there. Within the work program, under the operations side, again, that'll identify a lot of our general maintenance of parks and facilities and ball fields, trails, cemetery, flood repair fits into that scenario. And real quick on flood repair, we are making headway on the trail system. We have topped lime on all of the trails again. We do have a lot of work to do on the shoulders, those type of things. And Boyson Park, we have some repairs to do to the turf areas yet. But all the trails are usable. You will still see trail close signs. That's more so for liability reasons, just because we don't have all the shoulders built back up, those type of things, and there are some hazards out there. But we are making headway. Flooding in the spring is probably the worst for us, just because ground conditions aren't conducive to doing repairs. And then we have a lot of obligations of things that we need to get ready for our season, so it's kind of the perfect storm, if you will, that we end up with in the springtime. So we're probably a month or two out before we get everything in the trail system and parks repaired, but we just have other things that we have to focus our staff on. But we did want to get the trail topped again, and we all know it's a very popular trail, so we wanted to at least get that portion completed. And then you'll see in the program a lot of park improvement projects. That'll be infrastructure repair, and then we also include the CIP items. We'll have several of the CIP items that will also be included in that program also. And then under the forestry side, a lot of identifiable tree care and maintenance items. Probably the biggest one is our response to the emerald ash borer. And that staff, I would say that right now, about 80% of their time is dedicated to removal of ash trees. Now, we do complement our in-house removals with contracted work, so with the two working together, we're continually reducing that inventory of ash trees within the community. So that's one of their top priorities in the work plan, and then also our planning objectives that we do every year. Typically, we will plant somewhere between 100 to 120, depending on the year, trees on city property, city right-of-ways each year, and that is headed up by the forestry staff. A lot of those are grant-funded, our tree planting projects, and then we also try to roll in some type of community involvement, whether it be businesses, other nonprofits, schools. We try to incorporate that programming in as we do our tree planting projects each year. So, and then the 1,000-acre pollinator initiative, that is something else that falls under the umbrella of our urban forestry division to help us with those initiatives associated with that. And then Falk Woods, it's over 100 acres, management of that. That also falls on their radar, and we have that identified in the plan also. And then real quick, on the recreation side, and really our work program for our rec staff is the Recreation and Parks Guide. That pretty much identifies every program, everything that they're doing throughout the year is in that guide. So that really is their program for the year. And basically it provides opportunities, I call it from tots to teens to adults to seniors, everything included in that plan for the entire year. Just wanted to note a couple of things within their bus trips. That's something that we keep trying to expand on. This year we have another one of which is one of our most popular bus trips, is the ride to Wrigley. This year it'll be Cubs and Mets that are playing that day. And then we're also doing a trip to Des Moines, ICUB game, and then also over to the State Fair this year in August as part of that. And then in the fall we call it kind of our 55 and over bus trip. We have, that's going to be a trip to Gaze Mills in the fall. They're going to stop at Bright Box and have lunch as part of that. So just wanted to note that we keep trying to expand those opportunities, especially what we can provide for seniors in our programming. And if you look at the guide, there's a lot of new opportunities within there. And of course, within the guide, our youth sports programs, our garden lot program out at Lyle Park falls under our rec staff to oversee that. And then, of course, our events out at Lyle, they manage and put together those events out there. And then our farmers market over at Tabby Park, which will be starting up the first weekend in May, coming up here. So with that, that's a quick overview of programs and all things Parks and Rec. So again, if there's anything within the programs or plans that you'd like to discuss, or even if you have a project or something that you see that you'd like to bring forward, I encourage you to do that. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions from council? Yeah. Mr.
Just a quick one. I would like to get an update, a little more detailed update on the emerald ash tree borer situation. Sure. Not necessarily tonight, but again, all of that is in my ward, and I've driven around a lot of those neighborhoods and stuff where all those trees are coming down, the stumps are still there, but I'm kind of, since they're all kind of in my section of the city, I'd like to really get a more updated report on that, and if nobody else is interested in it, I can just stop in and do that one-on-one, so.
Yeah, we could do it either way, whatever you guys would.
Anybody else interested?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are? Okay, all right.
We'll schedule something, have Mike come back in, kind of give a quick, briefing of where we're at to date and what areas that we're working in, which areas that we will be going to.
Thank you.
That was great. Part of my question. So I've seen a lot of the street trees that everything's gone but the big stump.
Yep.
And then pink ribbon or pink around it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Is that?
They will come out.
They're ashes. Those are ashes.
Those are probably all ash trees. Now there are other trees,
just in the last week.
that need to also be removed, and it could be a mix, but the majority of those right now are ash trees.
And then I'm glad to see the Donnelly Park parking lot on there, because that's seen better days.
Yes, it has.
And then do you still use that ball diamond down there at Donnelly?
We do. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think it's been used for a while.
It escapes me actually what year we went in and redid that, put new backstop in and everything. Now, of course, it was underwater a few weeks ago, so we need to bring in lime and redo it. I was actually over there and looked at it earlier today.
Saturday mornings.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was. Last time I saw it, or realized it looked like it was all grass.
No.
No.
It's
So I have a question about community service. Do you get a lot of requests from organizations or the schools about community service opportunities through your department?
It's sporadic, I guess, at best. We do receive those, and we try to figure out, what we have available at that time to accommodate, what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I guess it's probably seasonal. Do you, if there was a more formal mechanism, something I'm trying to work on with the schools is building a special diploma you can earn, or, if you have so many hours of community service, it's a distinction with your diploma. I'm just trying to make sure there's enough opportunity to point them in certain directions. Would you be able to come up with a bunch, or would it be more of a burden to try to?
Well, I don't know that I would call it a burden at all. I think really the mechanism is, or if you will, that toolkit really exists, and you were really the driver of that, and that's the Adopt a Spot program. So a lot of the things that are within the Adopt a Spot program we use when we're pulling together those type of projects and events. So it's kind of all there. It's just a matter of trying to fit. Sometimes, and again, it depends a little bit on time of year, those type of things, trying to fit the project with the group and their timeline that they want to do everything within. That's the logistics of it that sometimes gets a little difficult, but we always try to work something in if we can.
Okay. Well, and I'll probably just follow up with you one-on-one when I get more information, if I could get the two schools to kind of have a similar something, a similar approach so that it's, anyway, I'll talk to you about it offline.
Sure.
But cool. Thank you.
Let's talk afterwards, too. Yeah, I have one more question.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Now, what was that question?
Sorry, you just missed it. Any other questions? No.
Oh, with Kristen coming on board, do you
Yes.
foresee the want or the need for some greenhouses to grow our own flowers?
Well, we share a greenhouse right now
The little one out there,
with
right?
the Master Gardeners, and they do start the majority of our annuals.
Do they?
Yeah, we've been doing that for years.
Never mind. I didn't realize that little greenhouse could produce that much. Okay.
Maybe in the future, just
My
make it
thought
bigger.
was going to Knoll Ridge and seeing that, all those flowers, but well, that's good. Never mind.
I will just make a couple comments here. I've had a couple of residents reach out to me over the last couple of weeks, and they've placed calls into your department asking about assistance in identifying the ash borer trees, and I just want to relay their gratitude. They said that I can't get them to give me a name, but they were extremely excited, and they said the individuals were most helpful. So would you please pass that along? The
Absolutely.
community and the citizens are, I think this is something that is of great concern, especially to our elderly, as they try to identify what they do and don't have and what expenses there may be, and they're concerned about that. So I told them I would bring that back up, and if you would, please take that back to your department. So appreciation again from the citizens on identifying those through the forestry side. So any other questions for Mike? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. This brings us up to engineering. We have nothing starred in this category, but are there any questions from council in this category
That's a miracle.
for the first round of engineering? This
They come later.
This will be the consent agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to the community development. As well, community development has nothing starred in this category. Any questions from council that they would like to ask? Seeing none, we'll move on. That brings us to library. There's nothing noted here at this time. That brings us to the consent agenda with the mayor's abstention. Administration services, partial payments. That brings us to the regular agenda. Administration services. That'll bring us up to item number 4 with Synergy Partners. I'll let whoever's going to take that and take it away.
Just a note for council on items 1, 2, and 3. Those will actually be moved back a council meeting until May 9th. We were notified by our bonding agent, Tiana Pooler, that she's been getting contacted by several of the potential bidders on our bonds, and with the Easter holiday, a lot of them are actually going to close at noon the day before. And so with that, we want to make sure that we get the broadest cross-section of potential bidders on our bonds, and so she said that we should move that back until May 9th. We'll get more competitive bids that way. And then on number 4, this is an extension. This is the actual formal development agreement with Synergy Partners Incorporated. This is the special incentive that we had designed to assist them in trying to recruit a restaurant out onto the multi-tenant building out on Tower Terrace Road. If you remember back, I know it's been a while since we approved the MOU on it, but in essence, one of the things that we're running into is that there are a lot of multi-tenant properties that have been subsidized across the Cedar Rapids metro area, and in particular, they had lost 2 restaurants they'd been negotiating with, one to the complex that's being developed across the street from Target, and another one out to the Fountains by Edgewood, both of which have received city incentives. So this was our attempt to level the playing field to help them recruit a first restaurant into that area.
Any questions on number 4? Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Gaudet.
That's okay. So do we have a way to gauge if that's been effective in terms of the number of people interested in that Synergy project?
They have not reported back to us yet. I know that they are working with a commercial realtor on that to recruit restaurants. I guess I had figured that our measure of success would be when they come to us with a proposal for one to come in.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Any other questions on that item? No? Okay, we'll move on. Next item starred, that'll be none other under the administration. It moves us up to public services. Any items, any discussion for the council for those items up to that point? Okay, seeing none. We'll go to public services. Ryan, that brings you up on stage, sir.
Okay, thank you, council members. Item number 1, resolution approving an amendment to a professional service agreement with Anderson Bogart. They've been our civil engineers since the start of this project. I'll put this up on the map for reference on the viewer. The amendment is to put them in a more of a construction phase position throughout the course of this project. What that includes is staking services. So when the construction starts on the facility, they'll be in charge of going out staking, surveying, and also surveying for all the civil improvements. Most notably, they're going to be in charge of wetland mitigation. All of the hatched area that you see through here, that's all wetlands that we had delineated, and now we have to mitigate those. We will be disturbing enough wetlands, so we have to come up with a mitigation plan. Their responsibilities are to remediate the wetlands, and they'll be doing so in the retention area through here. And so this is a planned wet retention area, and so part of the scope of their services is to come in and after the improvements are made in that wet retention area, they have to reestablish the wetland. It's nothing we can really get around. It's a requirement by the Army Corps of Engineers. This has been planned since the forefront of the project. So that's really the scope of services included within those amendments. So. Any questions?
Any questions for Ryan on that item? Ryan, I have just a quick question. This is just a detailed question on my part. Is because of the wetlands in that particular area, does that impact any of the geothermal issues as far as the drillings on the other side?
Back up. That was a long discussion. So if you see this box right in here, that's the geothermal field. This elongated box here, that's where the loops actually come out of the field. And so the loops are buried at 15 and 30 foot respectively, but they have to come out of here, and the Army Corps knows about this. We're not going to be disturbing that much. It's about a hole about that big. Okay. That they'll be popping out of. So they're very well aware of the improvements to be made. But this is, well, they'll pop out on the other side of the wetlands. They won't really disturb it that much.
Okay, perfect. So, it was just a general question.
That's a good question.
No concerns. I just was curious. So, okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Item number 2. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would the city be exempt if the state starts taxing solar? You know, they're talking now about
that. I do not know. I don't know how that's going to go. Yeah. I don't know, Lon might have more. I don't know if you've been tracking that, but that's a shot in the dark right now. I wouldn't be caught up with that.
We wouldn't have to pay that.
I can't give you an exact answer to that because it would depend on how the Iowa Utility Board allows it to be connected. The city is not exempt from fees that are charged by Alliant or Mid-American or other providers for access to and maintenance of the electrical grid. And if that's how it's actually allowed to be collected, which is the basis of the change in law that they're trying to get, then the city would not be exempt from those fees. If it's some other fee or if it's levied as a tax on top of the normal charge for electricity, then presumably the city would be exempt from that. So it would really depend on how it actually settles out in the legislation.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 2, this is a motion approving the project calendar for civil improvements for this site. What we're trying to do here is get the bid packages out to prospective bidders. That way, when it comes around to the end of May, when we want to take this project back for final approval, we'll have those bids back ready to go. Council will be able to see those. So the intention here is more of a scheduling deal with us. We want to get an early start. That way we can get some competitive bids. So the entire bid package for civil improvements, what you see going out, we've estimated about $780,000 worth of improvements. And then if you read through the bid packages, they're due back on May 16th, and then they have a late start date of June 10th. We don't give them much time. They have 35 working days to get the building site in order. That includes grading the pad, and then we program liquidated damages in there for $300 per day. So pretty standard bid packages going out, but again, we're not asking council to approve the final bids. We're asking us just to go ahead and let the bids. That way we can get the schedules meshed together.
Very good. Any questions for Ryan on that topic?
Okay.
It's been a long-awaited project. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Well, Mr. Draper, here we go. Back to engineering.
So your first item is a public hearing on the 2019 sidewalk assessment project. Staff has received 2 letters, and those have been forwarded to council. One of them, she signed both the group letter and the other letter, so it's from the same person. There might be people in the stands that also come during the public hearing that are either for or against those locations. So basically, the locations were the 25th Avenue, the south side from 1565 25th Avenue to Indian Creek Road. Grand Avenue north side from 985 Creek Bend Drive to 150 Grand Avenue. 33rd Avenue south side from 3295 6th Street to 3290 7th Street. South 12th Street, east side from E Avenue to F Avenue, and that's where we received the letters from. And 22nd Street west side from 840 22nd Street to 9th Avenue. In your council packets, I gave you a lot more information, and so I've condensed this a little bit so you can actually read it on the screen. So it shows the preliminary assessments. They range anywhere from $372 to, like the most is $1,380. I know there was some questions regarding the property along Grand Avenue, and so I just pulled up the Lynn County GIS to kind of show that. So in this one, you can see we're filling this gap here if you look at the mouse, and then this section here, per Lynn County, it actually shows it as already being city right-of-way. So that's why we're not actually assessing that portion of it. We've previously on the south section of Grand Avenue gone through the process, and again there we thought it was also City of Marion property. It's old railroad right-of-way. It was about 30 hours of staff time to do that. We have to order an abstract, do a title search. There's legal staff time that we have to do with that, and also the delay of project. So ballparking it, whether we spend $5,000 to $10,000 to figure out who the owner is, we're not going to get that back in the $1,000 assessment. So that's why we're not assessing that piece and assuming that it's City of Marion property. So I know that was a question that came up. So any questions on the sidewalk assessment?
Renee.
So are we going to put in the sidewalk on that piece then?
Yes. And we've done projects in the past where it's all along city property. I mean, we can assess ourselves, but we're writing ourselves a check and bringing it back. So there have been years where there actually was no assessment, that it was all on city property.
Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, Mike, can you just quickly go over for all of us so that you remind us on how these sections are selected?
Sure.
What
so
the process is on how we get to this batch of sidewalks?
Yep. So there's a letter in the council packet that I gave you guys, and this is a letter that goes out to the public. So it starts off with the Sidewalk Assessment Committee. So there's 2 citizens that are they volunteer to be on the committee. There's 1 representative from each school district. Tom Dobbs of the police department is on it, and then Will represents city council, and then the assistant city engineer. Those are all voting members. And then we have non-voting members such as the planning and development director or assistant director, the public service director, and the project engineer who's actually going to do the design on the project. And so they all meet. We have a map that shows all the gaps in the city, and then they prioritize those gaps based on the amount of money. So we kind of make a very swag method of this is what we think the sidewalk's going to cost based on how steep the slopes are. Is it flat? Are there trees? Are there driveways? And try and get as much as we can with the budget that we have. So this is a pretty small budget. It's what's left over that we didn't spend last year. Typically, it's $125,000 that we have, so we can take on bigger chunks of sidewalk. So once those locations are picked, we then bring them to City Council to make sure you guys are all good with them before we start making the notifications. Then what we do is we've actually certified, mailed to everyone that gets assessed, and it's actually published in the paper as well. And that's the requirement for the sidewalk assessment anytime you assess someone. That's the state regulations. Then they get the opportunity, that's what the public hearing will be on Thursday, for them to be for or against the project. Assuming that the City Council says this is where we're going to put them and nothing is modified, because there's no snow on the ground, we'll get out and get the survey done, get the design done. We'll come back to you with a project calendar to get approved plans in front of you. We will let the project, once the bids come in, again, we bring it back to City Council. There's another public hearing. You see the bids. So if the bids come in really high, you can say, no way, we're not doing this project. And then we actually proceed with the project.
So this is a combination, like in this instance, this is filling in a gap where there is no sidewalk. Are some of these actually replacing sidewalks as well, if I recall from the past?
None of it is replacing sidewalk. All of it is filling gaps.
All of it is filling gaps?
Yes.
All right.
So we have a separate program that's called the Sidewalk Inspection Program, and that's where we go out with the pink paint. That's done every other year. So that's a different program, and that's on the homeowner to do.
There had been some discussion in the past, and forgive me because there's just so many discussions, that possibly maybe in the future we could take a look at, not doing these on an annual basis, looking at them as a total project, maybe applying for monies that could be allocated towards that. Could you just refresh my memory again? Is that something that was 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, just a real high level? Again, I think for the benefit of the rest of the council, it'd be good, just a good item to kind of tuck away in the back of the mind as far as a total, just have a one and done, be done with it and move on.
Sure. So there was actually a couple discussions. One was, should we assess? And, that's why we're keeping track of our hours of what it takes to do this so that we can kind of formulate, are we getting the money back depending on the size of the project? Because the amount of paperwork that we do for the assessment process doesn't change whether that's 5 properties or 100, because it's all Excel and mail merge and stuff like that. So that's one question. And so we're keeping track of that so we have an idea. And then when we did the CIP, it's not in your 5-year CIP as an annual program anymore. And that's what we've talked about, is because we have all the gaps identified in GIS, to spend the time to figure out, is that a $2 million project? What is that actual dollar amount, and can we take it all on at once then? Obviously, the design of that is going to take a while if we're going to do that, just because sidewalks and ADA are one of the most complicated parts of a project. Even when you do a street project, that's the most complicated part of the project. And so you can get the street profile perfect, and then you start looking at the intersections and the ramps don't work, and you have to tabletop the intersections and go back and change storm sewer because now you got low points. So that's the hardest part. And so what we've talked about is looking at what that total dollar amount is when we have some staff time, presenting that, and then saying, it might be $2 million, it might be $5 million, but what is that total dollar amount to get all the gaps in the city filled? So, and then we would bring that back to the CIP group and evaluate that against all the other projects.
So if I'm correct in saying, if we approve this or continue with this particular project, we're not getting out too far in front of this where we could potentially next year say, okay, we're going to stop. I'm just wondering, are we fairly close to maybe considering looking at in the next year to 2 that we would be okay to continue to keep approving these as we're coming forward at this time?
I think as engineering develops out a sense of what it would take for a total project cost, I mean, if it's $2 million, we could conceivably come back to you in the CIP ranking process with a proposal to do $500,000 a year for 4 years or $1 million over 2 years. But that'll really be driven largely by what they come up with as the scope for doing all of those gaps. I guess this is just one of those ones that I looked at it for the investment of staff time and the total budget that we're expending on it. It didn't seem to make sense to be continuing to do it. 10 years ago, before construction inflation really ate up that dollar amount, we were doing a lot more linear feet of sidewalk for those kind of dollar investments, but every time around we're just doing less and less linear feet for the same dollar amount. So I just thought, let's take a pause and let's revamp that program.
So for example, in this year's, in looking at these numbers though, how far back did the review of this go? I mean, was this in the works a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago? I'm just trying to figure out what the timeline is here for when the thought is to do this to when it comes to council. What's the timeline?
Well, it used to be an annual program, and so we have a list where some of those locations have been on the list for 15 plus years, and it's just, at one time our budget was only $32,000. You couldn't do a lot for $32,000, and so those bigger projects, we knew we couldn't do them, and there were other needs. And so, I mean, that list is just continuing. You get one of them, for example, the 25th Avenue, that was a new one that was added to the list because someone lives on that street and requested that sidewalk be put in so that their children can get to school easier and not have to cross the street. So it's an ever-evolving list that's updated year-round. But some of those projects have been on there for years.
Sure. So it sounds as if, though, just to be more explicit with my question is I guess we'll just continue to keep seeing these sidewalk improvement projects keep coming forward until we officially just overlay looking at what a bigger project would look like, and then we would pull the trigger to...
No, right now there's no more money in the CIP after we spend this money.
Okay, so this is it. Okay, very good.
I would anticipate for Mike's staff, I don't want to speak for what his workload is or how they're managing them, but I would anticipate that there's probably going to be at least a year gap before we would look at bringing something back, because FY20 we don't have funding in there for this program.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on this topic for Mike in the engineering category? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one, Mike.
All right, so this is our pedestrian beacon project. So again, we'll have a public hearing. So we got bids back. There are only 2 bids, one from Trey Electric and one from Price Electric. Trey was at $49,878, which was only 55% of the engineer's estimate. The second bid was $82,726, which was 73.1% of the engineer's estimate. So the beacons that we're talking about are the ones that are on South 15th between the schools, on Alburnett Road, on the Grantwood Trail, on Boyson and Tower Terrace. There's a picture there, but it's the amber flashing beacon that you push to get their attention when you're going to cross the street. And so we're putting these on 3 locations on the new Grantwood Trail that we recently opened. So they'll be at 31st, 35th, and 44th. So they have a start date no later than 7/8/19 with 30 working days and liquidated damages of $300 per day. So we're recommending moving forward with this, but again, we'll have a public hearing on Thursday, so if someone's against the project or for the project, they can speak their piece, and then proposing to council to accept that and move forward.
Mr. Jensen.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, there's a 40% difference between the 2 bids, between Trey and Price.
Mm-hmm.
Are their quotes including exactly the same hardware?
Yes.
So the rest of it is all labor and or estimation or profit?
Yep.
Okay. Just seems, okay.
They bid the same plans, the same specs.
I assume that was the case, but man, that's a big difference for that big of a, small of a project. All right, thanks.
Moving on.
All right, so the next one, now that we have our correspondence policy, things have changed a little bit in the TAC environment. So we now have a no parking request for First Street. They did have a petition that they submitted. And so it's between 29th Avenue and 33rd Avenue. And so this is just receive, file the petition, and refer it to TAC, which TAC, I'm assuming, is going to give a recommendation of adding no parking to one side.
So at this time, the process is just merely letting council know that we have a receive and file under our new correspondence process, correct?
Correct. If for some reason you guys did not want us to spend staff time on it, you could tell us to only receive and file it and not refer it to TAC. But that's how it's written currently.
Well, that sounds like a little discussion.
That person live on First?
The petition had several. It should be in your council packet of everybody that signed that petition, and they all lived on First. I didn't go verify them all, but they all had a First street address on the petition.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is currently, you can park on either side.
Yep,
the change
and
would
I don't know if
be-
it'll show up, but you can actually see there that there's cars parked on both sides of the street.
Yeah, it
So
does.
this is one that Fire Public Service has an issue with when there's cars on both sides.
Yeah, I would agree. Or when Lenmar has big events, parking goes all the way back.
Yeah, this has, and we've talked about this one before. It's gone to council before, and we had a large contingent of those that are parking on the street that came and did not want us to add no parking at that time, but we do have some different council members now.
So at this time, the ask is of the council is, do we wish to move this to TAC?
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
And if we choose not to move it to TAC, the alternate is?
I will tell them that council received and filed your request, and
Very good. So I just want to make sure we're clear on what the ask is. Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, how did you look at this from the standpoint of the new policy and I'll say, the required number of signatures for a petition? How was this evaluated by number of people, by households that are on the street? How did you look at this?
so this one, they actually got me the petition while we were working on that policy, and so I just held on to it until after that.
Okay.
But staff, even before we had a petition several years ago when this came before, staff was in recommendation of adding no parking to one side.
Okay.
So staff has always had that side with this. It was city council at the time that chose not to act on that.
Yeah, I'm more interested in saying, with looking at it from the perspective of the new policy that we just put into place a few weeks back, and going back and making sure we're looking at how we're adhering to that.
Yep.
Yes, I'm sorry, Miss.
That's okay. So are there any other streets, I think Autumn is the westmost, all the way to 9th maybe, that are no parking on one side, or would this be the first in this area to go that route?
There are a couple that parallel 10th, and I think that was because there was students parking on those streets, that there was no parking added there. But other than that, as you can see from this map, all these streets you can park on both sides. However, if they were built today, they would be built so that they're actually, instead of 28, they'd be 26 foot wide. That's back of curb to back of curb, and there would only be parking on one side.
Yeah, so whatever we do with this guy is probably going to have a ripple effect for the whole neighborhood. My 2 cents is I think that we should go to no parking on one side, because I've driven through there, I've seen how it is. I think if public safety has concerns about it, that's one of our driving issues. I wouldn't feel the need to send this to TAC, but that's just me. So, starting the discussion, Randy, that you asked for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just clarification, maybe I'm the only one that's a little confused about the new process that we have, right? And there were certain criteria established by that process that we talked about a couple weeks ago. So how does this fit into that? I hear Renee in the idea that whatever we do, we're setting a little bit of a precedent here and making sure that we're following
this new process that we've established, which I think part of it was public safety, part of it was, right, how many households, the percentage, a number. So maybe just talking through that would be helpful in this particular instance.
Sure. So the policy is just whether we have enough to spend staff time on it. So forget what tax decision is going to be. This is whether it actually goes to TAC or not. So the policy was just written so that instead of one household writing and saying we need no parking, that 20 households had to write and say we want no parking. That way staff and council are only working on things that coming from multiple residents. Then it would go to TAC, and I'm just telling you what TAC's going to say. Normally you would know that maybe there was a traffic study that needed to be done. Say it was a traffic, they wanted a stop sign or something like that. We'd have to do some research. In this case, we've already done the research several times, so we already have that information. And so we don't necessarily know what the response is from TAC yet until we send it to TAC. And so the policy that we adopted doesn't take into consideration what TAC's recommendation is going to be, only if we should send it to TAC.
So my question to you is, did they meet the requirements for us as a council to say it needs to go to TAC?
I believe they had 19 signatures, and again, because they gave me the petition, but while we were writing that policy, per the policy, they had to have 20 signatures, but I felt this was close enough. So if you don't want, if you say that's not close enough and you want me to tell them to go get a couple more signatures, I can do that.
So I'll speak for myself, right, and thinking about we established this policy for a reason, and so if we say 19's okay this time, then the next time somebody sends something forward and they have 18 and it's not the 20, I would think that we would want to follow the policy that we spent time on. That's just my perspective in this space.
Yep. And this was just one where, again, it was before we started the policy. I asked them if they would go get a petition. They got it quickly and brought it back to me. I don't think it'll be a problem for them, and I could probably have them get a couple more signatures even before Thursday.
Now, is it 20 signatures or 20 households?
It just says 20 signatures. I'd have to go back and read the policy to be sure.
Because you've got
That's
probably...
a big difference.
Yeah.
Because I think there's 14 households and 19 signatures.
Okay, thank you. I didn't add it yet.
I don't know that in the TAC policy it gets that specific if it's a household or a signature.
Mr. Jensen?
And it's also to the engineer's discretion, I believe.
I was just going to say, I believe that's to the engineer's discretion because there may be one request that covers a large area, and so in that instance, we might want to consider households. And in this situation where there's 14 households, you wouldn't be able to get 20 household signatures. And so there's some discretion from the engineer, and I think we left that to him for that reason.
I think we've always got to look at it as to, I'm not as concerned about the number of signatures as I am, kind of like Will's talking about, the number of households, because I can have 20 signatures from 10 households. And also interested in looking at it, as I said when we talked about that new policy, kind of the percentage of the households that are signing it based upon the street impacted.
Right, and here
It's a really, really long street, and I have 20 signatures, but it only represents 10%. I'm not interested in that, in looking at it, because I don't think that's a representative number on a really big street. So, but if it's 20 households and you've got 20 signatures, even though it represents 10, that's a pretty high percentage. So
sure.
I think it's all relative, and from the standpoint of looking at it in that way, I think we need to certainly continue to look at it from both perspectives.
Yep. So I just need direction from the council on how you'd like to proceed. If you want me to ask them to get more signatures, then I can do that.
I think this is a twofold issue. I would personally like to see this, out of respect, I'd like to see what our new policy reads. I think we can't move forward without knowing what we have or haven't done here, in my opinion. So has anybody got anything that they can find this or tell us exactly how that reads?
But if it says...
Rachel's pulling it up.
If it says thank you. The 20 signatures, but also his discretion, that kind of eliminates.
That's what I'd like.
20 signatures.
Right. I'd like to see that. Right. I'd like to know without a shadow of a doubt what it reads, because we are sitting with 19. We have discussion if it's households versus signatures. I don't think we can sit here and say what the direction is going to be without knowing. We're now doubting what we have now placed in our laps, and we need to know it's going on.
Signatures, yep.
And this is,
So the policy is up on the screen. For request to add or remove street parking, for the city engineer shall determine which of the following will be required on a case-by-case basis, either a minimum of 20 signatures of the people using the street or 80% of the households affected by the requested change.
There we go. So there's our answer. So we don't have the 20 signatures, and we don't know if we've got 80%. Do we know how many houses are on that street?
how many?
32 is what Deb just said.
32 houses, thank you.
14, so that's not easy.
Mr. Mathematician, what's our
Yeah, right.
percentage?
Yeah. So
40%.
I do think it's super important that we follow our own policy. And even though, the stickler of a 19 versus 20, I think it's a great point, because where do you draw the line? But I also think that this should be an iterative process for us to continue to tighten it up as these things come through, because we took a shot at it, and I think it's better than what it was, but I do think that even just based on this one scenario, there's some room for tightening. Because this is a clear-cut case where I don't think it would rely on engineers' discretion, because there is a finite number of households. We can get a percentage affected and then look at the statistic if we're comfortable with it. I don't think that the 10 households out of 32 is clearly not the 80%.
Well, again, my voice when we were talking about this was to lean more towards a percentage of the households, not the signatures. So I think that's more definitive as a representative number of people on the street that truly want to change. So I don't think we ever talked about that, because you can have a big dichotomy between 20 signatures and 80% of households.
Okay.
That's on some streets that can be a pretty big gap. On this one, it's a pretty sizable gap as well.
I would agree. If that was to have been amended, just looking at it quickly, it would read 20 household signatures to follow to be concurrent.
I never thought about that aspect of it
Good
until
point,
now.
though. Nope, it's a great point.
Yeah.
So as we read it in front of us, my thoughts are is that we send it back to engineering and not move forward to TAC, because it doesn't follow concurrent with our policy. But do we have a consensus of what direction the council would like to move with this?
I would concur with that.
Yep.
So if I send her an email or call her tonight and says you need to get 80%, do you want 80% of the households, or do you want 20 household signatures by Thursday?
I think the 80% is a more specific driver, because you could have a street with 32 houses or 100 houses, and 20 signatures isn't necessarily representative. 80% is always going to be 80% of however many houses are on there.
Keep in mind that the reason that the 20 signatures is in there is because you do have stretches of street where there may not be very many households, but it's or addresses facing that street, but it's a very active street. So we wanted to provide an avenue for the people that use the street to actually file a petition as well, versus those ones where you just might only have 6 households that actually have driveways on that street or addresses on that street.
And I would also say too, even if it is only 10 out of 50 households that sign it, that's still not making it happen. It still has to come through us. It still has a public hearing. If there are people who are opposed to it, they can still come, and just because they get 20 signatures doesn't mean it's happening. So I think you want to keep it not too high out of reach to get on a petition, just to get it started if it needs to get started. Because, someone could walk a street 2-3 days a week, and because of their schedule, half the people may not even be home and can't get a signature. So if you get that lower amount, keep that lower amount, I think it helps with things actually happening moving forward. Because we can still deny it. If we get enough people come to the public hearing and say no.
Either one is a heck of a lot better than what we were looking at before.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so instead of one person trying to drive a situation, I'm fine with either one. But I was in favor of just a percentage of the households, not 80%. I thought that was too high, but so I could go either way on this one right now. But.
Paul, do you have a comment on this?
No, not really. to me, it's all a safety issue, one end to the other, so,
Ms. Atkins?
yeah.
Well, I concur that we follow the policy, and I would certainly welcome if it, if it's a safety issue, that always would trump, right, the decisions that we make. But we worked, I think, kind of diligently on putting something together from a policy perspective, so that's
Very
fine.
good. Renee?
Yeah, same.
All right, so at this time, we are not going to make a recommendation to move this on to TAC. However, I'm going to come back again in full circle, is Mike needs a direction with this, if we're going to ask for the 20 or the 80, and at his discretion. So perhaps, any strong opinions on that?
No, not strong.
So, if she does get one more signature, I'm assuming it was a she, get one more signature, and then we have that by Thursday, we'll just leave it on the agenda and move forward with it, right? On Thursday?
We'd come back to obviously have a request to see if it would go back to the TAC, or the council would make a motion, in my opinion, to take action on this at that particular point.
Yeah, we would add the additional signature to the petition is how I would see it.
So what we're trying to do is remove this, sending it off, creating staff time, having the discussion. It brings that back to this level of saying thumbs up, thumbs down on removing parking allowable on one or the other side. Okay. Do you have what you need on that, Mike?
So you guys just want one more signature if she can get it by Thursday?
Uno mas.
Okay.
Picky.
Thank you.
You gotta do-
So this is like a song. Second verse, same as the first.
All right, so the next one is, again, a petition to request additional speed limit signs. So this is not changing the speed limit, this is just adding signs. Per the policy, they need 10 signatures. They have more than 10 signatures. And so they're just requesting more 25-mile-an-hour signs with the school there. Before, when 50th Street didn't connect to 29th Avenue, it wasn't an issue because there's only one way to get in there. Now that those streets have been opened, then there's traffic coming from 29th and speeding down, and so they would like to get some speed limit signs as you come off 29th Avenue, because it is a different speed limit, and that way it's easier for police to issue citations as well. So again, this is just a receive, file, and refer to TAC, and then TAC will come back with a recommendation.
A question. So thinking about the sign pollution around City Square and that discussion, I hate putting up more signs, although I get it's a safety issue and the school is right there. At TAC, should you have this discussion, is it as effective to paint the street with the speed limit, or is there another way other than signs to help mitigate the issue they're bringing to our attention?
I guess that's more of a state code. I don't know if we can enforce paint on the street as a speed limit.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's, gosh, I hate more signs, but I just thought I'd ask if there were alternatives to having the message out, but I don't know.
I don't recall there being any alternatives as far as enforcement goes in the code. I can take a look at that, but I can already imagine all of the situations in which people would probably have a pretty good defense to something like paint on the street, like snow coverage.
But there's still signs up. It's not like there aren't signs there now. They just want more.
Yeah, and it's just a thought. I just
Still can enforce
wanted
it.
to ask it if it was in your deck of solutions
Yeah.
at TAC.
I mean, technically, all city streets in the city of Marion are 25 mile an hour unless otherwise posted. However, not everyone, unless it's signed, they can act ignorant.
To be fair, ignorance of the law is not a defense.
That's true. But it's much easier for PD to be sitting out there and say, you just drove by the sign that says 25 mile an hour, and it's much easier to issue that citation.
And it's right in front of a school.
So, Mike, what part of this, kind of going back to our previous conversation, is this an item that normally should be handled again going through the new policy before it would actually come to council, or is this still the process for a request of additional signs now too? I feel like we're redoing the same thing here.
So again, this does go through TAC, and per the policy, they have to have 10 signatures of those using the street. They had more than 10 in the petition, so it can go to TAC. TAC will come back with a recommendation unless council doesn't want it to go farther right now.
Okay, so this is the normal process of which we will see requests for these items. So, okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on exactly how we're actually receiving this. So the question is, again, do we refer this on to TAC, or do we merely receive and file?
Do we decide that tonight or decide that Thursday?
Refer to TAC.
I defer.
Okay. Very well. There's your order, sir. Let's take it to TAC.
Can I?
Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah. Can I just ask you about these forms? Are you guys supplying these forms?
We are not, so I'm not sure where they found them.
Weird that they both came in the same form. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that too. I thought maybe we did get them to them.
I don't know if we have a link on our website for them to download them, but maybe you can search petition, and that's the first one that comes up.
Google's an amazing thing.
Same thing, yeah. We did give them to them.
Okay, so that handles number 6.
Number 7 is an additional petition. For this particular one, there are 3 letters instead of a petition. These are the 3 property owners that live on connection. So this would be 100% of households. So it meets the policy. Here's just kind of a big picture. So Connection Avenue is the street that is blue here. It's classified as a collector today. You can see we have Tower Terrace down here in red, and then the dotted red means it's not built yet. So that's the section that we need to build the bridge. Obviously, we don't have funding for the bridge right now. And then you have some Echo Hill that isn't built up here as well. So what they're asking for is to degrade it from a collector to a residential for various reasons, such as parking on the street, changing how they're... So when we built the street, we built it as a collector. So now I'll zoom in a little bit more. So these are the 3 houses that we're talking about. So there's one unit here, which is this guy here, and then there's a duplex here, which is here. So you can see with their driveways, because it's a collector, we limit the number of driveways that are on that. And so that's how it was drawn up to begin with. The developer has come to us several times to reconfigure that and change that, but that's how it was originally drawn up.
I have comments when you're finished.
Okay. Go back. So this is a request again, following the policy. It's 100% of the residents on the street. So we would receive, file, and refer it back to TAC. And
Mike, could you give us for clarification, can you give us the, in our showing of roads here, the north-south road there, in your zoomed-in box, could you give us just a reference point there?
So this is Winslow.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
And this is Connection.
And so I'm assuming we have additional residential lots scheduled to have access, driveway access out onto Connection for
Yep,
future.
so similar, like you can see this one where it has one access, so there would be another duplex that's built here. And so basically it would be similar to a frontage road that's built off of Connection, because we don't want all those driveway accesses on a street that's has a higher classification, because it's meant to move traffic versus a residential street that can have all those accesses.
Perfect. Are there any questions?
Yes. I don't have any questions. I have comments.
Take it away, ma'am.
All right. So when I was on planning and zoning, this little gem of a project came through, and we spent so much time with the developer in determining this frontage road, and they promised they were never going to come back and ask for this, and they've done this before, yada, 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 unless and until when Tower Terrace gets developed enough, I wouldn't, me personally, even consider changing the status of this, because buyer beware, this is how this was built, and they knew it going in, and that's their issue. It would create such a log jam if everybody had their own individual access onto Connection, because it needs to be a collector. There's a lot of neighborhood that comes out. Lau Park is right at the end of Connection there, and I just, when I saw this letter, I don't know if the Scholz's is the one I happen to be looking at on top here, but all of this stuff we knew, and they should have known and cared at the time they bought it, or the developer should have changed it to some recommendations we made, but they didn't want to. So to me, unless and until Tower Terrace comes through and really reduces the amount of volume on that road, I would not be in favor of changing its status.
Mr. Brandt?
Yeah, I would agree that they knew what they were buying when they bought it and moved there. I don't see the need to change it. I mean, if traffic counts say someday to change it, sure, but not just so that they could have street parking. No, it's what they bought, and they knew what they were buying.
Mr. Traber? No? Ms. Atkins?
Process question again. Right? So if we follow the process, it goes to the TAC group, and then they would come back with their recommendation, which could very well be what I'm hearing from Renee and Will, right?
Correct. And unless council feels that it's not worth staff time.
Right. Okay. I was, once again, I'm just.
Right. So there's a minimum qualification to get through the TAC, but just so you know, TAC's going to basically have that same agreement, but we have to, because they follow the policy, we have to bring it before you.
Thank you.
To clarify that point, we keep saying that there's the threshold to get to TAC. That's not actually accurate. The threshold is to get on the agenda for you to determine whether or not you want to send them to TAC.
Right.
So just to clarify that, every time they meet the threshold, Mike will bring it here and ask you to refer them to TAC. If they don't meet the threshold, then they don't even get on the agenda. And that was kind of the goal here, was to not use council time and then to have these referrals go to TAC that have the support of one or two people as opposed to the majority of the people involved. So even if they meet the threshold, or if this one has 100%, you can still say, no, that's not worth the staff time, forget that, no referral.
Thank you.
Steve?
But isn't Connection Avenue, if I've got my location correctly, Lau Park is on the west side of this, that when we have some really large events out there, there are lots of cars parked on Connection Avenue. I think I've been out there one time where I have witnessed that.
If I could, Your Honor.
Well, yeah, I can think of some large
At times during large events, to Steve's point, we do have parking on Connection at times, and there are times where we actually will change the parking status of that from no parking to allow parking on one side of Connection for those type of events. If I could, just one more thing that I'd like to add to this conversation too. We talk about volume of traffic on Connection. I think it's important to note that that has an 8-foot side path along that roadway also, and that continues to increase in usage and will continue to increase as things develop out there. So adding, if you would go towards adding extra driveways, I think that's a condition that you also need to take into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to the question. I guess my opinion, I'd like to throw my 2 cents in on this, is I will not support to move this one to TAC. So I'm going to be in favor of receiving and filing. As well, too, I'd like to see that remain open without jumping too quick to allow additional parking in places. We're trying to fix parking in one spot and we're giving it back in another. So let's have a consensus here so Mike can move forward with that. So
well, how I'll write it on Thursday is I'll leave it how it is now, and because they've met the policy, and so then you just have to amend the motion.
Very good.
On Thursday.
I just want to make sure we have a consensus up here. So thank you. All right, very good. That closes number 7. Number 8.
All right, no more TAC items. So through the CMPO, the Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization, which Councilman Sternad and the mayor are on the policy board, myself and Kesha Billings are in the TAC committee for the CMPO. So as part of that program, Hiawatha had the intersection of Boyson and I-380 in the fiscally constrained and funded portion. Because we're going to move forward with the intersection of Tower Terrace and I-380, they don't want to have both intersections under construction at the same time for obvious reasons. So they have asked for that funding to be deallocated and make it available again. So $776,000 is available in fiscal year 23 for a road project. So it can't be a trail and it can't be a transit. It has to be a road project. And so the deadline is April 21st for that application. Then in fiscal year '24, there's going to be about 2.75 million available, and that we have a little more time on that application deadline. For these funds, there is a 20% minimum city match, and that's for all the trail funding and all the funding that goes through CMPO. There's also TSIP funds that would be available, as this has been identified as a road diet project. And what that is it's going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. A 4-lane road typically acts as a 3-lane anyways, because if you're in one of those inside lanes and you're trying to churn, that's basically we have extra pavement there that doesn't need to be there. That could be trails or amenities, something else on the outside, a tree corridor, anything else on that outside. So a tree diet is considered a safety improvement because you don't have all the rear end, because you get in that dual left turn lane rather than blocking traffic if you forget to turn on your turn signal. So the project originally that was put in there is the Marion Boulevard, 7th Avenue, 10th Avenue. So basically it was the entire city limits of Business 151 was the original application. And right now it is actually the current highest ranking project in the fiscally constrained plan. So Randy is getting used to all these terms. So it has a score of 242.15. So if they purely look at the score, it should get the funding. Not to say that it's going to, but if they purely look at the score, it should. So we looked at different ideas to look at this. Right now we have an estimate of $15.8 million that Anderson Bogert just put together, and that's to completely reconstruct 7th Avenue from 8th Street to 26th, basically roundabout to roundabout. But that number also does include internal costs that we would not pay someone to do, such as construction, administration, construction inspection, things like that the engineering department would do internally. So it takes it down to 14 and change for the actual construction portion of the project. So what we would recommend is at least applying for funding. One of the stages east of 12th Street, I would not recommend federalizing the uptown section of it, just because we're going to have enough regulations with the historic buildings that we don't want to bring more regulation into that. So I'd want to be east of 12th Street. So there's basically 3 different sections. There's 12th to 16th, which is 2.4 million. There's 16th to 22nd, which is 2.2 million. And then 22nd to 26th, which is 2.5 million. We could ask for 2 stages, 3 stages. I would recommend that they're concurrent, so I wouldn't do 12th to 16th and 22nd to 26th, just because you're going from 4-lane to a 3-lane back to a 4-lane. So I would be consistent. So I would either do the first 2 or the second 2 or all 3 of them. In the council packet, I kind of combined some of the costs, and we're getting almost to that 80% threshold by doing either of the 2 phases. If we were to go after additional funding, such as TSIP or other grants that are out there, that would help cover some of that money too, so we could potentially go after all 3. So again, the deadline is April 21st, which is this weekend, so it doesn't give us a lot of time to put the application together. But I wanted to start the conversation to see, number one, make sure council is in favor of applying for that funding, and then what your feelings are as far as should we focus more on the east side or the west side based on development, or what we want to target for those changes.
Discussion.
Do we have any idea if Hiawatha and Robbins have any plans of extending Tower Terrace Road? I mean, all Hiawatha really wants is the intersection on the bypass, or on the...
Yeah, so I have given the presentation on Tower Terrace. I don't know if you were around, Paul, but we do have a master plan for that. I believe it's like 2040 if we were to use all the CMPO fund just to get it built. Robbins is obviously, it's going to be hard for them to do Tower Terrace with the bridges that they have to build, but that's another discussion to have. But Tower Terrace is supposed to be moving forward.
They have a worse bridge problem than we do.
Mm-hmm. I personally think it's a great opportunity for us to take advantage of opportunities here. If we take this in, 3 phases, I mean, do we have to be on schedule with each one of those, or how does that pay out if it is awarded? How is that? I'm most concerned about this nucleus right here that we've got going on with everything with near future issues going on. Can we hit the timelines that this will be needed? And when, are they just slated for those, could they be slated for those years? And if we're not ready for the next phase, is there a penalty there, or how does that work?
So the money becomes October the year before. And so obviously with some of the money available in 23, some of the money available in 24, we could, typically what we do is we don't ask for them to reimburse the engineering to design the project, but that could be something where we say, well, we want to go ahead and include the engineering cost in 23 to get it designed, and then 24 to build that section. That is an option. Or we can do city funds. There's more processes that we have to go through, the more different aspects of it that you include.
That's right, I forgot.
And so, if we hire an engineer, we have to do their form of qualifications versus our form, stuff like that, which is fine, we can do that. It's just how much do we want to go through. So there would be deadlines and stuff like that we would have to have city funds to be able to move forward with the city's match. And that's, if we change this to a resolution on Thursday, that's what you guys are putting future councils to, is saying we will match this money, and say the bids come in really high, they set that dollar amount. So it's only the 776 and then whatever they get awarded for the following year, and the rest of it the city has to make up that difference with grants or local funds. And so in our CIP, we have some money allocated in those years from either bonding or local option sales tax. So we do currently have some funding mechanisms that are in the CIP. And so this would just help supplement. I mean, if we have a $14 million project, we got to get some money elsewhere, unless we're going to put it all on the backs of Marion taxpayers when we have an opportunity here to use some of that funds. That's why we're recommending to move forward with something, whether it's one phase.
I totally agree, and I'm to the point now, and I'm just speaking for myself, but it would be nice to start seeing some completion to this corridor up here, as we're, I'm just thinking through the eyes of somebody who's never been here, a developer, commercial, industrial, residential, it doesn't matter. It's time to start paving the golden path here, and we're so extended far out, but we still got such a drastic mess up here that it would be, in my opinion, it would be nice to start backfilling this project and start sweeping from the west to the east and start getting some of this stuff up to date where we need to be. We still got a lot of holes to fill up in this uptown area here, and I think that would be a huge component, and we have a lot of infrastructure that needs to be dealt with too, obviously. So that's my opinion, but I mean, I just want to get the ball rolling on conversation up here. So
how do these dollars, Mike, how do these dollars you're talking about for these different sections, stages, fit into our CIP? I mean, I did not go back and look at it, but I mean, you got $7.5 million for these 3 stages. So when we talk about doing 2 or 3, again, I understand Randy's comment that typically if we get too much going on, we can't get them all done in the time frame we talk about. That's been the situation with 6th Avenue. So I'd be really concerned about starting something and not getting it done in an appropriate time frame.
So right now in the CIP, which is Transportation 2001 for 7th Avenue, 7th to 27th, we have 1.4 million and lost 13 in fiscal year 2020, or I'm sorry, 2022.
Okay.
And we have 1.6 million in GO 22 in fiscal year 2022, I'm sorry. So there's 3 million right there in fiscal year 2020 that could pay for engineering, it could pay for match. In fiscal year 2023, we have $2 million in lost and 1.1 in general obligation. In fiscal year 2024, we have 2.5 in lost and 2.3 in general obligation. So we have those because we just kind of guessed at what those numbers were going to be back then. So we have some money in there.
We got quite a bit in there.
Yeah.
So talk to me about starting from the west to the east. I mean, when you said west to the east, you're talking the west being the 12th to 16th stage.
Yeah, I would just, so there's the
That's the one you're
stage
talking about, is
obviously
the west
from,
one.
there's obviously the stage from 8th to 12th. I wouldn't recommend that just because there's already enough issues with that, with the historic and
I
all
thought
that
you were
stuff.
ignoring that one completely. So
Yep.
west one you're talking about is 12th to 16th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I completely support. I think it'd be certainly a smart decision to go ahead and apply for this. I don't think there's any reason not to. Just a matter of which stage we go at, and I'm not sure I have one preference over the other.
Obviously, there's development that's happening on the east side with the hotel and everything next to that roundabout, so I didn't know if it made sense to start from there and work your way this way, or if you'd rather fix what you're seeing up here. That's kind of more of a gut feeling. That's not an engineering decision, that's a policy decision, so we'll fix it. It just depends on.
Renee?
Yeah, so I'm kind of with Steve on, I want to make sure that we can, if we're going to bite it off, we can chew it, and it sounds like there's money in there, but just to digress for a moment, do we have the second highest ranked project by chance on that CMPO fund list, that if we deferred this one, we've got something else lined up that's maybe in our grasp, or is another city kind of step in? Because I hate to, like Randy said, I mean, this is an opportunity for $750,000.
So right now in the 2024 fiscally constrained plan, there's only 7 projects, and only one of them is Marion.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Then we move forward. The next project that we have is Tower Terrace Road 2 from New Winslow Road to Old Winslow Road, which is our bridge.
Yep.
And that is available in 2030 to 2040 is our next project. So if we're going to apply for this project, right now we either need to apply for it before 2024, or we need to push it into the next group of projects, which would be 25 to 29.
I think since we had, I mean, me personally, since we had earmarked, maybe not these specific sections, but we had earmarked with lost funds and other things, this overall project, I would feel comfortable moving forward with going for, submitting the application and seeing if we're fortunate enough to even get it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean we're going to get the money, but it never hurts to ask.
Mr. Brandt?
So let's say we requested it for the 12th to 16th section, but then there wasn't enough going on uptown when there was time to get the money, and it was more development going on over here where the 22nd to the 26th section. How hard is it to...
Very.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking now.
So it'd be nice, I mean, if we knew what was going on with the old mall and the development along uptown 7th Ave. I mean, that's the...
Who has the crystal ball?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
But are we assuming, I guess it's really just, never mind.
But again, these are 23 funds, so by then, things are going to be different. So this isn't for next year. We don't get these funds until 23.
Right, so, yeah.
If I may, I would say that when I look at this, with what Mike is talking about and wanting to make sure that you do two pieces together. From the economic development side, when we've seen drafts or proposals or concepts, they are closer to the uptown core. I think you would see more development on that 12th to 16th stretch than you're likely to see in the 22nd to 26th Street stretch. I mean, if you think about that one, you've already got Lebeda down there. We've already seen the redevelopment of the Salvation Army into a new project. The bulk of what we're going to see on that end is likely to be around that roundabout. So when I think about how it's likely to progress from redevelopment or new investment along the corridor, my first thought is that you'd want to go from 12th and then work your way east rather than coming the other direction. It's kind of unusual because a lot of times engineering will actually drive how these have to develop because you've got to put sanitary sewer in a logical sequence or something like that. So it's kind of unusual where you have a scope of a project like this where that's not actually driving your decision.
Right, and that's exactly why I was kind of commenting, is because this is a major overhaul for us up here. You know, I mean, we got proposed, you know, structures and opportunities that we haven't even begun to get ready for, you know, that what lies underneath those roads. So it truly, you know, like we say, you know, the east is looking wonderful, and it's kind of taking care of itself through the developing process. It's back up here that we still have some. It needs a little TLC.
Yeah,
And it's a great opportunity. So
I'd support is also going west to east.
Okay.
That makes more sense.
It appears that you have what we're looking for here. So this particular item here was a discussion of regarding this particular item. So Mike, do you have what you need from us, sir?
Yeah, I guess for Thursday I'll change it to a resolution applying for the funds for 12th to 22nd. Is there any need to do all three, or do you think 2 is enough at this time?
2 too much?
2 gets us almost to that 80-20 split.
I would hate to put us over too far and overcommit, in my opinion. I'm just speaking for myself again. I don't want to be greedy because in my line of work, well, I won't go there.
What do you and Lon recommend? 1 or 2?
My thought on it is 2, because there might be an opportunity. I mean, Mike is talking about the availability of funds in 23 and 24. If there were also funds available in 25, but we've already committed to the entire project, then we would miss that opportunity to turn around and put in one more application for that next piece.
All right.
Yeah, that gets us so close that we would hate to have missed that scope if we
Because we're going to start work on it sooner than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks to you, Mike, and your department again. Obviously, a lot of work that goes into that, and you know, being new on that committee, my eyes have been opened, and I know acronyms that I never thought I would know. So, kudos to you guys. All right, number 9, sir.
All right, one last item is actually for the central corridor for 6th Avenue. So while we were out here tearing out the street, they found some storm sewer that was actually failing. We thought it was in better shape than it was. And so this is a change order in order to allow us to fix that. So item 9, 22, 26, 43, 48, 49, and 66 are at the bid unit prices that we got. 515 is a new item. And so basically we have unit prices for each one of those things. We're just increasing those unit prices. So they're holding the numbers of when they originally bid that project. The only one that's new is the SW501, and you can see it's close to the SW507. It's actually a little cheaper. So we're just increasing the contract to get those additional items taken care of.
Okay.
Is that storm sewer out of warranty?
Very much out of warranty. For our infrastructure, we actually have a maintenance bond. We can't carry a warranty, and storm sewer is only good for 2 years.
2?
2.
Wow.
For the contractor.
I bet you sell some insurance on it.
It
Yeah.
brings it and it take it. Yeah. Any discussion or questions on that one? No. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate all your work on that. With all respect to all departments. Mr. Treharn, you, sir, have the mic.
Boy, crowd.
Mike, you're kind of windy today.
Talk for once.
So the first item started under planning is the IDO related to the property east of the roundabout on 7th Avenue. I believe the council has seen the project in the past, but just to further clarify, the building elevations for the property east of the roundabout, they're very similar to what were proposed before. So you've got brick, cement fiberboard, and some glass. So this is the elevation that'll face the south. This would be towards 7th. I would point out that there's been some changes and modifications to this elevation. If you recall, I believe they had the steel doors, and it just wasn't as attractive, and so we asked them to go back and kind of provide some additional elements to that, and they did do that. Obviously, the east and west elevations aren't nearly as it's pretty tough to do when you're building a multi-tenant building and you got to drive through. Just to walk through the site plan a little bit, and Probably should have showed you this first for clarification, but I think the council's pretty up to speed on this. So the roundabout, 7th Avenue, Drug Town's here to the north. The multi-tenant building will be pushed up towards the front, as we like to see. It does have the drive-through that goes around. Some of the concerns with the drive-through was how long it was without an exit lane or a bypass lane, and so they've accommodated a bypass lane in this vicinity here. The parking's in the back, and the trail will be along the south side. So from an IDO perspective, this project is run through the Planning Commission, and they are recommending approval of the project as proposed. The council is aware there are other issues that are going on with this site, and the next item is actually the plat of survey related to the property that they've proposed to acquire from the city. So we're platting the property, so we'll have the legal description, and then we'll move forward with the public hearing regarding that. And prior to the public hearing, we'll have the resolution approving purchase agreement. And as I'd said at the last meeting when we were talking about that, that would be the time to kind of discuss if there's further questions on the pricing and that. So we can hold the public hearing about the disposal, I think, and if there's still questions we need to move that forward, we can do so. It's just a process from a legal perspective that we need to ensure that the notice was set by the council and held in association with the disposal. So we just want to make sure that we're kind of getting that in queue as it moves forward. So,
Tom, is the entrance with the hotel then? I get in there.
So there'd be
Tom, could you zoom in on that? I'm sorry, it is so small that we're all struggling, even on our printed copies, to actually see what is what there. Thanks.
So there's an entrance in this vicinity here. I know it's difficult to see, but the nose of the roundabout has an island that comes out here, and so that is a full access left in, left out. That's going to be tough. I mean, we knew that from the preliminary plat.
The right only entrance there?
No, it's full access. Yep. And the developers, when they moved forward with the preliminary plat, these accesses have been set from the beginning. And some of you may recall there was a lot of questions about having that many accesses and where they were. But this is how it landed, and they've been consistent in how they brought that forward. I think that's why it's critical for them to have that. Sorry, that probably gets you dizzy.
That's how you get in the hotel as well.
Yes, but there's an additional access on the other side between, and that is clearly why we have that public access easement across the whole back of the property. So 27th Street access you'd be able to use to get to this facility, the hotel, and then the next one you can go all the way across. Does that make sense?
Yeah, looks pretty nice.
So the Planning Commission has reviewed it. They're recommending approval. And I'd just point out that, we did ask for some changes, and the developers did make those.
Can you show us on that, can you zoom back in again? Is there a wall there? The entrance to the drive-through?
I'm sorry, which plane?
Could you just zoom in again as to showing us the entrance to the drive-through? Okay, so the entrance to the drive-through would be only accessible from the south side, right?
Correct.
Is that a wall then, or what? Right there in front of your fingertip. What is that?
So that would be an island. An island that would separate it from the traffic. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yep,
Thank you.
Definitely. You can see here, I'll try and. You can see the cars kind of highlighted, and then this is like the bulb of the island, and then access to and from.
We got all these drive-throughs in these corners and crevices.
Yeah. We're seeing that on almost every site plan that comes through right now.
Okay, questions? Mr. Draper? Nothing? Colette? Mr. Jensen?
I'm good.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
So I believe the next item is actually the plat of survey that is associated with this project. Just for I guess, reference, you have the staff report, but the project we just looked at is on these 4 properties. The red, which is the city-owned. This is the actual parcel, so it's .177 acres. And we'll just setting the date for is the plat of survey, and then we'll set the date for the public hearing on the sale of that property. Last week, at the last city council meeting, I made a quick reference at the end of that meeting about all the parcels, and I don't know if that resonated with everybody after we'd talked about it for a while, but for reference, and this map shows it nicely. So this is owned by GLD, and then this parcel was originally a part of Marion Iron. This was a part of the railroad corridor, so these are 2 separate parcels. And then this is a part of the railroad corridor. So when this property comes back in, and prior to issuance of I know we're doing some platting here, but we'll come back and final plat it, put it together so it's one abstract and clean it all up. This whole area in development's been kind of complicated as it relates to platting. So we've been trying to be diligent about cleaning up those areas, and I know it's a lot of plats and a lot of conversation about legal descriptions, but when it's all done, it's going to be a lot nicer than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Jensen.
Just a very minor suggestion that when we put our agenda together in the future, I would suggest for anybody from the outside looking at it, as well as myself, that instead of just putting POS, you actually spell out what that stands for.
Sure.
Anybody else looking at that would have no idea
absolutely
what that stood for, so I think we got to be careful with our acronyms, because I was sitting here not sure exactly what that meant until you spelled it out. And so for the convenience of others,
absolutely,
that'd be for everybody on the staff. Be careful with your acronyms, because I don't have my acronym book with me at all times. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You don't have them, right?
Some will be open about that same time, the 31st.
Will 6th be open?
Across the back there.
So will 6th be the west of the roundabout?
Right.
That's a very good question. This project will likely get underway probably in the next couple months. So they'll probably be finishing that up probably in the fall. Wouldn't that be? Yes, this project would be finishing up in the fall.
Oh, this fall?
Yeah, the multi-tenant building. 6th Avenue, we've still got a couple properties to acquire, and we're working towards that. They will likely go through condemnation, and that's what we're setting it all up for. So depending on how we proceed through that will depend on the project moving forward and being completed. I would likely see us still working in that area in the spring, but would really like to see it being completed late fall, as I think everybody would.
Every effort should be made to do so.
Yeah, it's certainly the priority right now. Yep.
Any other questions on item number 2 or the POS? Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
That's all right. If
number 5 or any other item in there.
If you don't mind, Gary's going to present the public hearing on the fees. If we can just talk about 9 just quickly, because it's a quick item. The motion to receive and file the request for some building permits prior to final plat. We've received this and we're still reviewing it. I don't see any action coming forward on this item for Thursday, but I want to make the council aware. This is one of those situations where we have if we get the building permits started prior to a final plat and improvements don't occur, then we got the occupancy issues with the building. So we'll bring back a recommendation on this and talk to it relative to the projects as it move forward. But we're certainly not in a position to be able to make a solid recommendation on this before Thursday.
So I'm sorry, that was on item number 9?
Item number 9, correct.
Okay, what about number 5? You're going to have...
Yep, Gary
take
Hansen,
that one? Okay, very good. Thank you. I just want to make sure we were clear on
there he is.
The out of order there. Thank you.
Yep.
Tom just wanted to go out of order.
Mr. Hug.
Oh. Let me shut this out. Oh.
Ooh.
All right.
Right.
Good afternoon. Actually, I think it's evening now. We're going to talk a little bit about our housing program we're bringing forward for public hearing on Thursday. Our rental inspections, as of the end of March, I have not updated it for April. We're at 4,452 units in the city of Marion right now. We could be adding as many as 300 more units here in the next couple of years, so it's growing. Why do we do rental housing inspections? I think public service is probably or public safety is probably the biggest thing reason we do it. Housing program is designed for safety of the citizens, to give residents of Marion safe rental housing. We live by that. The fire prevention through inspections of electrical systems and smoke detection is probably the biggest thing we find in houses are smoke alarms that are not working in the rental housing. Whether it's the tenant that takes the battery out because he needs it for his kid's car or toy, or if it's just, the landlord not getting there in time to, replace them. If they replace them once a year and they go bad. 65% of the deaths from house fires are related to no working smoke detectors. That's a really huge number. And I've seen it in different cities around where you hear of a tenant living in a place and the smoke alarms didn't go off and they passed. Don't want to see that in Marion ever. Home electrical fires in the United States account for an estimated 51,000 fires, 500 deaths, and more than 1,400 injuries. That's another huge number, and that's just electrical fires. That's not even the other things that can cause fires in houses. So another reason we do, we look for health hazards. We are not the health department, but we look for the source of it, of insufficient plumbing, leaky windows, leaky roofs. It's moisture caused, whatever it's caused from. We try and mitigate that so that they can prevent that. It causes big mold issues, and we get calls every month about somebody having mold in their house. Well, we really don't mitigate the mold, but we will mitigate the cause of the mold. So if it's a leaky pipe or if it's a leaky roof, we go and we try and figure it out. They also can contribute to the dilapidated structures if they're leaking like that. If the water's running down the side of the house and it's leaking, it can ruin the windows, it can ruin the doors. We look at general trip and fall hazards because of that, decks and steps and handrails. So we're really doing our best to try and keep these buildings safe for the renters. We also end up with a few complaints throughout. If you look at 2016, we had 109. Now that is not all housing, rental housing. That is total complaints we've had, but the majority come from the housing side of it. 2017, we were up to 126, which is a 15% increase, but then 2018, for some reason, we jumped up to 198. It's a 57% increase. So we're really trying to, if we can get into these properties a little more often, we can kind of maybe stop some of that before it happens, is what we're hoping for. I just put a couple pictures up here of people calling and complaining about the neighbor having a mattress next to their garage or an old gas grill that's not working. They just don't ever get rid of the stuff. It just sits there because landfill fees are expensive and they don't have a way to haul the stuff and whatever. This next one is actually a picture of a house that the landlord had emptied it out and just threw the stuff out on the street and figured the tenant would come back and pick it up. Well, they never did, and it just sit there until we decided to, had a neighbor complain and had somebody go out and take care of it for us. So that's kind of things that we get for calls. So the changes we're kind of proposing, we're currently at a 3-year inspection rotation. We're going to change that to a 2-year inspection. At least that's what we're proposing. We're going to propose a landlord permit fee. This is a big thing in keeping the landlords up to date as far as where they're at and the properties they have in Marion. And we also have added a landlord permit suspension. I'll get into that in a little bit. But probably the biggest thing we want to change is our fees. Why are we looking at a fee increase? No, I'm going to let Zach talk about that. It's tax rollback, multifamilies.
Yeah,
He's our expert.
Gary said at this point, if someone's gonna attack the presenter, that this is my time to stand up. So he looks better as a bodyguard for me than vice versa. So, but the property rollback, or first of all, why we're looking to increase the fees. One of the things that Gary is looking at is to get closer to full cost recovery. Currently, right now, we receive somewhere around $36,000 to $38,000 a year, which does not cover the cost to do the inspections. Gary was also interested in the implication on multiple residential properties on what they're currently paying in taxes. So he asked for an example to look at how does that play out. For example, in this situation for Grandview Apartments, what you'll see with the bars, those are the assessed valuation, and then the dotted the dots with the lines connecting each, that's the amount of net taxes they're paying. So you'll see it going down over time. And the main reason for this is due to the multifamily property rate rollback. That's decreasing each year by about 3 3/4%. So what that's doing in this property, you can see, is starting in, say, in FY19, each year after that, presuming that the assessed valuation stays the same, it's decreasing by about $5,000. So in the context of the landowner or the landlord there, they'll be expect them to be paying less in property taxation, so that will come less into the general fund, but what they'll be paying in the offset of that is what they're paying for their direct user fee. So the user fee would directly support the activity they're getting the benefit from, in that case, having that property to be checked, the proactive inspection model that the City of Marion currently does. So that was one of the things that Gary is mindful of. He's looking at the fees of trying to keep it as cost neutral as possible, but at the same time wanting to understand how does it affect the current landlord on the taxes they're paying. So that was my only piece. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. So the current fees and program we have right now, inspections are on a 3-year rotation. $50 for the regular inspection for each building, $13 for each unit after the first. So if you have a fourplex, you're paying the $40 plus $39, or $50 plus $39. $50 for the first failed inspection, $50 investigation fee, $50 complaint inspection, and $50 appeal. So it's just always been that way. We've always just, never changed it since we started. It's been that way. Well, I shouldn't say we did. We never used to charge for the first inspection. In 2016, we did change that, but it didn't affect the bottom line very well. So proposing to have the housing program revenue funded. This would include the housing inspector, which is about $83,000, and that's with his benefits. Clerical staff time, they spend some time on the invoice side of it, the setting up the inspections and doing the mailings and all that. The clerical staff time with benefits is about $35,000. Then we have expenses for vehicle and tools and whatever else that, office supplies, things that come up. So that's about $4,000, kind of what we're figuring. So what we're going to propose is we're proposing an annual landlord fee of $50 a year. There's approximately 730 landlords in Marion right now, being a revenue of about $36,000. Hiawatha, and this is a mistake, Hiawatha actually does a one-time fee as well as what Cedar Rapids is doing, a one-time fee. I just found that out today. Did not have a chance to change both of them. I did get one of them. So in that respect, we'll be a little higher than what Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha are. Adding a registration fee for the houses. So we do $40 to a building, and then $10 for each unit after the first one. So you're paying for the building, you're paying $40, and then again you're paying the $10 instead of, basically getting it free. So you're paying $70 for a 4-unit. We have a lot of 4 units, and we have a lot of single family, about 983 of them, and then we have a lot of 4 units. So these are the 2 big categories. And that's going to cost them $70 to register that. And they do that every 2 years instead of every year where Cedar Rapids and Hiawatha both just re-register them every year. That's just their annual fee. That's the way they do it. That's going to bring in an approximate revenue of about $43,000 roughly, and that can change a little, but it's probably not going to change much. It'll change as we add more housing units, but it's not going to probably ever decrease. We've also added a penalty for failure to register. So we talked about that a little bit. If we find somebody that's renting a property as a landlord and they don't have it registered or they don't have a landlord permit, we call them up and we go after them. We say, hey, you need to get your property registered. You need to get it, and they could be renting the thing for 3 months and we never know it. We don't really go after them per se with a penalty right away. We give them the 5 working days to get it clarified, and that's once we find it. So it's like if we find it, we give them a week to come in and get it rectified, and we don't charge them any fees other than their normal registration fees. If they don't come in the allotted time, then we will charge them $100 extra for that. It's kind of a fee for us to have to chase them down. Regular inspection fees. First inspection is $75, and then we do a $5 a unit charge, and that is over 4 units. So if everything passes the first time, we're going to waive that first $75, and then the fee that we'll actually collect is the $5 a unit. And again, if you have a 4 unit, we don't charge the $5 because our theory is that we can do a 4-plex, we can do a 4-unit apartment complex in the same amount of time that we can do a normal sized single family dwelling. So we figure there's no reason to charge more for those. And then we're going to do a $75 initial reinspection fee, and then it's going to go up dramatically from there. $100 for the second, $150 for the third, and $300 for the fourth. After the 4th inspection with no compliance, we will possibly go out and post that do not occupy. Kind of depends on what is wrong with it. If it's something that's a super life safety thing, they're going to be out of there pretty quick. We'll be after the landlord to get things taken care of. If it's just an item that the landlord just doesn't want to take care of, we'll work with them, but it's one of those things that they need to get it taken care of. So we have to have some mechanism in there to get them to do it. And if we go out and post property, they can't have their tenant in there. That's a quick way to do that. This slide here, we just took a section from July 1st to the end of February. Our inspector did 1,478 inspections, and 40% of them failed. That's a pretty good sized number. We're really wanting to get that to be a lot less. And then out of that 40% in the first reinspection, 26% of that 40% failed. And then it just goes on from there. 9% on second, third was 3.5%, and so on. So you see that after the 4th inspection, we get pretty good compliance. When we start talking about we're going to post their property, they get pretty excited. We're hoping that with our fee change that we'll get them excited back when it's second reinspection instead of the 4th. We won't get to that point. In fact, we're actually hoping that it just goes completely the opposite and we don't have to ever go do reinspection. That'd be the optimal for us. So I did a couple examples of the cost to the landlord. And we're assuming here that it passed the first time because that's what our goal is. So you have a 1-unit, 2-year inspection. Then we're going to pay $40 for that 2 years for a single unit. Like you can assume we pass. If not, they're going to pay the $75 for the first inspection and so on. Cedar Rapids annual charges are $48 a year. So they're looking at $96 for the 2 years that we would do it. Hiawatha is $60 a year, and then $120 for a couple years. So we're right in ballpark, a little lower than what they're looking at. So it's kind of where we don't want to be pricing ourselves completely out and have everybody building apartments and stuff in Cedar Rapids, although I think my housing inspector someday would like that. So this is a 12-unit, $40 for registration fee, $110 for the $10 fee for each one, $55 for the inspection, and then there'd be no other fees, so they'd pay the $205 again. Cedar Rapids is $158 a year, and so $316, and then Hiawatha is $170 and $340. So we're right in line there again. And then I did one more. I did a 33 unit. That's a fairly good sized unit that we have. Takes the inspectors, and we usually send 2 to something like this. Takes them, I don't know, 3 hours probably for the 2 of them to do it, maybe a little more, depending on all the paperwork and how many issues they have. If they have a lot of issues, it takes longer, and if everything looks good, then it goes a lot quicker. But it's a $40 registration fee again, $320 for the units, $160 for the actual inspection. So we're looking at $520 for the fees. And again, these are 2 years. So Cedar Rapids is at $368 and $736 if you multiply that out, and Hiawatha is $380 and $760. So I think we're right in line as far as that goes. Other fees that we've put into this, no-show fees. We do have an issue with people not showing. We'll send them out. We send them out letters to their addresses, whatever they provided us, and we're hoping that when we start doing the landlord registration and permit fee, that we can actually get that and have it right every time. And the idea of doing that every year is so that if they move, if they get a post office box, if they go somewhere else, whatever, we have the right address. Because there's nothing more frustrating than for us to send this, and then we go out there and we get there and nobody's there. And the landlord's like, well, we didn't get anything. Well, we sent it to the address you provided us, and now you've moved and you didn't tell us that. So we've put a no-show fee of 75% for the regular fee, which is the 75. So we're looking at $131.25, and that goes up from there as well. Confirmed complaint. So confirmed complaint is defined in our policy or in our plan of inspection. Confirmed complaint is one that we go out, so somebody calls and complains about it. We go out to the property, we look at what they're complaining about, and either yes, it is an item that we need to address, and that is confirmed complaint, or no, it's not. We say, well, you don't really have a valid complaint. We're going to walk away, and we make our notes and tell everybody that it's not a real complaint. So we just deal with it the best we can, try and get the landlord to help them out or whatever. So many times it's a conflict between the landlords and the tenants, and we get involved in the middle. We did leave the appeals fee at $50. We don't want to raise that up. If they want to appeal our decision, we want them to be able to do that, and we don't want them to have to pay a lot of extra for that. So I did a side-by-side comparison. So you can see landlord permit annual. Currently, we don't have one. We're going to go to the 50. Registration fee is a 2-year. We don't have one right now. We're going to go to the 40 and 10 after the first unit. Regular inspection, 50 and 75, and then additional units. Right now, we get $13 for everyone after the first one, and we're going to go to 5 after the 4 units. So if you look at my example of passing the first time, a 1 unit currently, right now, they would pay $50. If they pass the first time on our new program, we're going to be looking at $40. And then the 4 units, 89 and 70. You might ask, why are we doing that? Well, we're trying to give them an incentive to get it right the first time. I mean, if we can get it right the first time, if they can get it right, then we don't have to go back. Our inspectors are able to do more properties in the allotted time they have. The more times we go back and do re-inspections, obviously the more time it takes for our staff to do that. And then these are kind of some of the others. I'll run through them real quick. First re-inspection, we're at 50, 50, and 75, and 100. We're going to change that to 70, 100, 150, and 300. No-show fees, like we talked about the first one, $131.25, and then if they don't follow up on the last one, we're looking at $525. I really doubt very much we'll ever get to that when they start seeing these fees, and they're going to make sure they're there. Investigation fee, we did jump that up to 75. Appeals fee, we didn't change, and then the complaint inspection, we went up to 75. So, kind of some other noteworthy things. So, when everybody has, if everything goes right, and we have a landlord permit, if they have 5 or more valid complaints in a 2-year cycle, on a property. Now, this doesn't mean if you have a landlord that has, 5 properties, it doesn't mean that we're going to count all 5 of them. We're using one property. And that's also going to include the PD's call of service. Now, if they go to a house and tell somebody to turn their music down because they're playing it too loud, that's one thing. But if they go to the apartment and they arrest somebody, then that is a call of service for us, for PD. So we're going to add those in there as well. We also will suspend their landlord permit if they have 4 or more regular inspections without approval, or if they're operating as a landlord or renting without a permit, and then operating as a landlord or renting without the registration. So we've built those in there just to try and keep everybody in line as best we can. So what does the loss of landlord permit mean? So the landlords lose the ability to take on new rentals. We can't really do anything with their current rentals, but we won't allow them to take on new rentals if we do that. Landlord will be required to take an accredited landlord education class. Marion Crime-Free Housing is one of them. CR's Safe CR is another one. And there's a number of people that go to that. I mean, I was just out to the Crime-Free Housing before I came here, and they had, I suppose they had 50 landlords there. It was a pretty good turnout. And I got out of there without had anything thrown at me. So, reinstatement fee, we're going to charge them $500 to be reinstated. Now we will credit them back to whatever it costs for the education. So if I think CR Safe, I'm not sure what CR Safe is. The crime-free housing, I think, was $50. We would credit that back. We'll credit it back up to $200. And there's some in Des Moines and different areas around, so they don't have to take the ones local. They want to get their license back, they can drive to Des Moines and take one. All they need to do is bring us a receipt that says they paid up to $200, and we'll credit them back that whatever they paid for it toward that $500. One other thing I wanted to bring up, and we've been talking about this, and I kind of want your opinion on this. This would be a vacant building registration. So if we have a vacant building, house, commercial building, whatever, that's not occupied at all, it takes a lot of man hours for city staff to go out and make sure that, I'm sure PD goes by there and make sure there's not vagrants in it. Fire has to make sure that there's, issues aren't being taken care of. When somebody does rent it, we have to go back out and redo an inspection on it. Cedar Rapids charges $250. I just checked a couple other cities. Clinton is at $40 and Dubuque is at $350. Now, the one I thought was interesting was Minneapolis gets $7,087 a year for a vacant building registration.
That's
we're
a
not
rental
proposing
place?
that. Yeah.
A rental house?
Rental house or commercial building.
Commercial building, anything?
Yeah, mostly commercial buildings up there.
Commercial,
Yeah. So my question is to you guys is if you would support a $250 vacant building registration. I mean, we can put it in there. I mean, we deal with vacant buildings the way it is right now, and it doesn't really make any difference to me. I mean, I just threw it in there because we spend time on it, and I'm trying to get cost recovery on our help. So that's kind of up to you. If you wanted me to do it, I'd put it in there for Thursday, and if you don't, I won't worry about it. So. Any questions on anything?
Yeah, question. What if, first of all, the guy that throws all the furniture out in the yard, obviously somebody's got to come and get it out of there. People who don't pay their fines, we prohibit the rental? Do we...
Well, if they're not paying
taxes, how do we get that money?
Well, if they're not paying their fine, we're going to go to municipal infraction process, and that's a lengthy process, but that's our way of dealing with that. If they don't pay that, then I'm assuming that goes back to go on their tax roll at some point.
I suppose we could keep them from renting it again.
Right. Well, if they don't pay that, we're not going to let them. They're going to lose their landlord permit for starters. We're not going to let them, rent that back out. We're going to go out and we're going to post it, do not occupy, and they can't put anybody back in it. a lot of it comes down to enforcement. I'll not argue that one a bit. There's a lot of enforcement that's going to go into this. I think after we get it started, and I think after time, I think it'll be all right. People will understand. And when I was out to the crime-free housing today, I had a lot of questions from the landlords that were out there, and a lot of them were like, "Well, what do we need to do?" And I'm like, "Well, we send a handout. When we send you your sheet that says we're coming to inspect, we give them 30 days notice, and when we come out there, we send a handout with them that tells them all the things we're going to look for." And we asked them, and like I told them today, I said, "Go in the building." I said, "Call your tenant, go in the building, check all these things, check off the list, make sure the smoke alarms are working, make sure the electrical wiring, you can go to Menards and buy a electrical tester for $5 and go in and check your own electrical. And if it's working, then there's not going to be any issues." And they were pretty receptive to that. I think we're going to see a few of them here on Thursday. I think the biggest thing that they had when I was out there today was the actual annual fee. I don't know. I think that's part of the cost of doing business, especially on these bigger units when their taxes are rolling back. They're making money on that. And I kind of look at it as, if you have a single family dwelling and you're going to rent that thing out, you're probably going to get neighborhood, we'll just say $700. I mean, I think that's probably somewhere in there. Maybe it's $500 or maybe it's $1,000, but somewhere in that area. So you're going to get that a month. So if you're going to get that every month, then that fee for the $40 and the $50 for the landlord thing, you're looking at, and assuming they pass, we're looking at $90, and that's a drop in the bucket for their monthly income that they're getting off that. And I know they have expense to it too. I understand that, but I just think that's part of their cost of doing business. So.
Any questions on
Can
here?
I
We'll start
add?
on here. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to add that I have been working with Brian Fink from the Marion Police Department on the PD's end of this, and we've looked at the crime-free housing statutes. We're not at the point where we're ready to bring that as an ordinance in front of council yet, but we've been working with the disorderly house code and the municipal infractions and how that relates to this. And so we worked with Gary on this as well. And so I just want to assure everybody that calls for service related to medical needs, domestic abuse, assault, and anything that's relating to just a safety issue and not directly related to like crime occurring, like say somebody gets stabbed on a rental property, that would be a violation. But if somebody's calling because their neighbor had a heart attack, so they call 911, that's not a violation. Or if they are calling for assistance due to a domestic violence issue, we don't want to prevent people from calling for help.
Renee, would you like to start?
Yeah, couple quick questions. So other than going to the crime-free housing seminar today, how will you roll out this information to existing landlords? New landlords obviously would come and register and they'd get this schedule of fees, but how do you inform all of these 930 or
Well, we have a good list of our rental housing in the community right now, and we get emails and addresses for, well, we assume that the addresses are right, so we'll do a mailing and an email. We'll send those out with our new fees when assuming it passes. And then at the same time we'll also send them the items that we look for again. The things that they can do to help curb their costs. I mean, they have to take care of them. That's the big thing.
Yep. Okay, and then so what do they get? I'm going to just play devil's advocate. So for the registration fee, the $90 that you were just saying, and the cost of doing business, I totally believe we need to cover our expenses in terms of sending people out and doing inspections. But what can we say they get for that registration fee? So we put them down on paper. Is there anything that they get for that?
For the actual landlord permit, they're that one. I mean, I don't have a real good answer for you, because that one is just a fee that's our administrative staff is gonna take in. It takes them time to enter everything and make sure that we have the right addresses and all that. The registration part of it, it's the same thing. As we get out there and we're registering these units, we have to make sure that they're all correct. Now, I mean, I could alter the fees. I could charge more for the inspection and less for the registration. That really doesn't bother me any. I mean, we can do it any way we want to do it. The big thing is we want to try and get these so that they're revenue funded, so that we can get that, extra. We're not getting anything for taxes on them anymore. We are, but not considerably, not what we
Right.
used to.
So my only comment with that is it seems like a little bit of a double dip. I would almost rather, maybe it's the same $90, but it's just one registration fee or something. I know that I get frustrated when like for instance, if you join a gym, there always seems to be some crazy fee that they can't really tie to anything, but just because you're new and you're signing up, you get dinged with it.
Right.
And so because there are two and there's nothing tangible or no benefit or specific thing, I feel like from a perception standpoint, it would almost be better to just label it one thing, maybe keep the amount the same. I'm not arguing the amount. It just seems like they're getting hit then with two fees that if we can't point to the specific benefit of what they're paying for to get that. The registration makes sense. We've got to have their information,
Right.
and somebody's got to input it and log it and track it. That's my only comment on that. And then for the question you asked of us about the $250, I'm not going to be here on Thursday, so I won't be able to take action on that. So I would ask, do we know what Hiawatha or Cedar, or no, you said what Cedar's doing, but Hiawatha and Robin, some of the smaller communities in our area? You did have some other comparisons.
I do not know what Hiawatha does. In fact, I don't. They didn't have anything published on their table of fees, so my guess is they probably don't do anything.
Okay.
It's Cedar Rapids was the only local one that I found. I mean, other than Dubuque and Clinton and stuff.
And so I'm not personally against that. I don't know that I would go from 0 to 250 and match the second largest city in the state, but I think a case could be made for something to be there. That's it. That's all I had. Thank you, Gary.
Well,
So my couple questions have to do with what I do for a living. So with the one at the end of the vacant property, so this is only for stuff that's considered rental. So if a house is for sale, owner moves out, and it's up for sale but hasn't sold, and empty for 90 days.
If it's for sale and it's for sale for more than the 90 days, we probably wouldn't be looking at that. We're thinking more of rental. And then the other part of it is the commercial buildings.
Sure.
And you've got a building like the Maid-Rite that has tenants up above, but is vacant below. We're not going to deal with that. I mean, we're there, every couple of years or whatever to check the units up, and we're certainly hoping that someday these buildings get filled. So we're not looking at that. To me, that's not a vacant building. So, but we're looking more at the rentals that don't go. And then we have people that we have a house here locally that has been vacant for, I don't know, a couple of years, and it just sat there, and we finally went to battle with them. They finally got it sold, but it was like it wasn't even on the market for the longest time. So if it's on the market, I understand that people move out and they have to sell their house. So that I don't know that our policy actually or our plan actually says in there, but we could definitely put something in there if it's for sale. It'd have to be for sale listed with a realtor, though. If somebody just had a for sale sign out in the front of it, I'm not sure I would buy that.
Agreed. Also, so let's say, like sometimes someone might do what's called interim occupancy, where they rent a property back for a certain amount of time from the seller, or the buyer might do interim occupancy, and it's technically you're paying rent. Is that something where you'd have to register the home for being a rental, or it's going to be short term typically? But sometimes they do go for a year. I mean,
so even short term, like the units that can't even think what do I call them? The ones where they rent them for a weekend.
Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb. Thank you. Even those we get those registered as rentals too. So if they're going to lease it for a short period of time, they need Well,
they're like under contract to buy it, but
if it's a contract like a rent to buy thing, we do not, because they have a contract for that that they're using?
I think I can speak to that. This is like when you're talking about they move in pre-closing, or like that's in my mind that would be legally a different situation because that's not really a rental unit. That's a situation where maybe a property's been closed on, but the original owners can't move into their new house yet.
But sometimes that can be extended period of time.
That may be something we need to address, but those are usually like 30 to 60 days, and they're. I mean, if it's the person who's bought it, but the closing hasn't happened yet, I mean, they're future owner occupied, and they're probably going to take care of it a little bit differently than somebody who's doing an occupancy in something that they don't ever intend to have an ownership interest in. And when it's a case of a current owner residing there until the future owners take over, generally that provides for them to take care of it because they have to turn the property over in the same condition. So we might need to address that somehow, but I think from a legal standpoint, I would be a lot less concerned about those than I am about say the property down the street where they do month-to-month leases, because that's where you're going to see people who aren't under any other sort of obligation to take care of the property.
Thank you. Just want to get that clarified. But I would your question at the end, I would concur with Renee that it'd be nice, but I don't know about 250 like Cedar Rapids, maybe something smaller.
You know, if you can come up with a consensus number, I'd throw it in there. I mean, I kind of up to you guys if you want something in there or not. This whole program is up to you guys if you want it. You know, if there's something in here that you don't like, you know, I'd gladly go back and rework it and see what we can do and come back. It's just, I'd like to get it going. I've been working on this for quite a while now, and I'd like to get it moving on.
I'm going to jump in here. I guess, did you have any more, Will?
I would say I like it.
Okay. I'm going to also concur or comment. I love this as well, too. From an insurance agent standpoint, I could roll with this one all day with you, Gary, because I think it's careful. We don't want to stereotype landlords, because there are great landlords there are terrible landlords. And from an insurance standpoint, I can give you all kinds of stories. One of the things I want to clarify is when we're talking about fees, are we talking about commercial and or residential, both, one or the other?
No, these are just residential. Well, residential, multifamily, but no commercial buildings.
No commercial. Okay, so I just want to make sure I was clear on that. We talked a little bit about, I've got written down on my notes here, the 5 complaints. I really like that because I think that'd clean a lot of business up here in town. We as a taxpayer, I'm furious that my taxes and the city's levy taxes are being controlled by expenses because someone that is profiting off of a commercial business, I'm paying for that. That's on the back of the taxpayers. That's not right. State of Iowa says if you rent a property out and you collect revenues, you have crossed the line from residential to commercial. Commercial is looked at totally different legally and economically. So those are all issues that need to be addressed. It is a business. It is a business. And you know what? Businesses aren't easy to run, and they're not cheap. So I am all for this, and I am all for the derelict houses, the stuff that people just do not want to take care of. There's people that have, unfortunately, inherited property. They live out of state. I have a house right next to my office. Gary, what did that house sit? 3 months with water in the basement because the furnace went out, the pipes froze, it was unoccupied, and now it sits up for sale. It's a mess. Sidewalks weren't shoveled all winter long. Grass doesn't get cut on a regular basis. I'm all for this. I could go on and on. What I don't want to do is I don't want to make sure that we're imposing issues where if we have the complaints, we need to take action, but we can't take action until the tenant is gone. I want to make sure we don't displace current tenants. As an insurance agent, we get calls as well too that pipes are broke, the roof is leaking. It's unfair to the tenants. You know, whose liability comes into play there? Is it a renter's insurance policy? It is the homeowner's policy. There's a lot of those issues that run into there. So following these complaints and how do we address them, you know, obviously we can keep them from leasing to future tenants, but we just want to make sure we're super careful in making sure we're not putting infractions on the tenants because of the landlord. So there's got to be I want to make sure there's
When
some.
we do that, we have to, one of the first questions we ask when a tenant calls us and says they're complaining about something inside the building, the first question we ask them, are you in good standing with your landlord? Because there's a lot of them that they haven't paid. And the landlord's like, I'm not going to fix it, you get to leave, you know? So we have that, but that's our first question when we ask them, so.
Yeah, and obviously the landlord's going to use their tools before we have to go down the legal road of obviously evictions. Renee, you'd asked the question, again too, I don't want to point to that topic, but it says, what do they get for the fee? They get to continue to do business, in my opinion, right? So why do I have to pay for a registration on my vehicle or license plates? So that you can use the road. That's how the process works, in my opinion. Some states require vehicles to be inspected. You pay a registration and an inspection fee. If you don't pass the inspection fee, you don't get your license. Same thing here. It's a cost of doing business. So I am in favor of all of this. I think if we have to, we need to lead the way. It's the right thing to do, and we're still not even with trying to come up with this, we're still not making this a cost-neutral process. The city taxpayers are still paying for a fee because we can't make this a cost-zero revenue for the program. So I'm all for it. Good job.
I learned this year, too, that if you're a landlord, if you actually have a landlord business and you spend over 250 hours working on your property, you qualify for a federal tax credit on your income tax. And so there's another break they're getting.
And all of this would be tax deductible as well, too, through their process. So back to the question of the 250. I'd be in favor of a compromise in there. 250 does seem a little stiff. I mean, economics will say that sometimes property can't get turned around quick enough. I don't know what the timeline would be on it. What were you proposing as far as a vacancy? The insurance policies say after 160 days, the policy changes, the language changes in a policy, and typically after 90 days, a carrier will remove themselves and cancel the contract. They're very strict about, because of this reason.
Yeah.
They want to minimize their losses, obviously. So
we have 90 days written into our policy and into our plan, but we can change that if you want to go a little longer and want to do, 180 days, do 6 months, or and then the fee, if you want to look at, $100 or $150 or something, that will pay for, a couple trips out there to make sure that, we don't have people living in it. And we, believe it or not, we do find that once in a while, people living in properties that are vacant, so it happens.
if the policy, if the property were to be vacant over that 90 days, let's say you did select a 90-day deal, and it goes over that, so you impose the penalty, then what would happen after that? Would it be?
We'll contact the building owner and tell them that they need to register it as a vacant building.
Okay.
Sometimes the code will allow us to, if they have issues with windows and stuff, have like broken windows or cracked windows, the code will allow us to tell them to just board up the windows so that, and paint them, and so that they look like the rest of the house, but they don't have any windows, because if we all know that if there's windows in the house and they get broke out, somebody can climb in there and live in there if they want. So.
Thank you. I think this looks great. You did a lot of good work there. I'm ready to get it going too, personally. Mr. Draper?
I just mostly send all the bad ones to Farm Bureau.
No wonder. What happened?
Tough crowd. Mr. Jensen?
Yeah, just two comments. Again, I like the aspect of trying to get more to a cost-neutral direction. I think that makes a whole lot of sense from the standpoint of the city's budget. Second of all, I'm completely in favor of your department gaining a reputation of being tough and strict. I mean, our police department had that many years ago. I lived in Marion all those years, and if people in Cedar Rapids complained, I go, I'm fine with that as well. And the same thing goes here. I'd rather have our city have a reputation for being very tough, very difficult on rental situations, because it has that safety aspect. So
right.
I'm completely fine with that and would certainly support that reputation as well.
Thanks.
Colette?
I would support the fee structure. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to determine if $350, $250 is the right vacancy fee, so I would defer to the other folks that might feel like they have a little more expertise in that
Sure.
space. But I like the idea of really recouping those costs. We're providing a lot of services for folks to do business in our community.
Okay.
I also think it rewards those landlords that are doing it right.
Yeah.
And so, right, this gives them an opportunity to sort of show the rest of the community, we've been playing by the rules.
Right.
So thanks for, managing these other folks that aren't. So I
Yeah.
think that's
Well,
something to value.
It's a real process for us as a chore to make sure we do that, but everybody needs to have a fair playing field, so.
Any other questions? No?
Randy, can I?
Yes.
So one of the things I just want to point out on this, and this has all been great comments, and I know Gary's done a lot of research on this, and I just want to make sure the council's aware. I mean, that number at the very first slide, that 4,500 approximately units that we have, when you think about it, would any of you have even guessed there were that many?
Yeah.
I mean, and so I don't know if everybody knows, I'm from Burlington. I grew up in a river town. There are a lot of rental market. I worked for the city for a long time. I'll tell you that and I've said this internally, that the last thing you want to do is lose control of that area of your community. I'm not saying that any landlord's a bad landlord or not. I'm just saying that I've lived in a community where it wasn't kept in check and in line, and there wasn't a process to ensure that the housing was safe and decent. And I think that's where we're at. We're just trying to ensure that occurs. There are going to be more rentals. We're seeing an uptick in it. I think if we did a chart to identify the housing market and what's going on in it, you'll see that there's going to be more rentals coming forward. And I think part of the fee and part of that conversation is we want to build a housing program. And we're starting with an inspections program, and this provides that opportunity to have a full-time inspector that's dedicated to nothing but this. That provides that individual with an opportunity to create relationships in the landlord community. I think the critical piece to this is having that relationship with the group that's out there. And it's just like anything. They're going to know who the problem folks are, and if we can build a relationship with them, we're going to be much better off. And I think in the future you're going to see we're that 40,000 mark. When we hit 50, we start to become a certified local government, and we actually will receive federal funds associated with housing. And at that point, you want to have a program to work into. And I think this just starts to set the stage for having that program. I could see us in a couple years, maybe we have the opportunity to hire somebody else that can assist and is actually doing some support for the landlord community if our numbers continue to grow. Communication, the classes, the training, there's a lot of things that can be built from the program, and I think this is just kind of the first step. So I really hope to see that kind of build into the future. So
I think it's good too. You said you just came from that meeting over there, and it's very important that we as a city and staff and council, we keep a positive spin on this because it is a good thing, and
Right.
we want to make sure we're continuing those good trends and at least set those expectations for people because there is more and more. Again, from our industry, I probably got 15 accounts that have 12 plus units that they're leasing. I mean, this is a full-time job for them. I mean, it is a career for them, and it's becoming more and more popular. So as we see these targeted price-pointed houses, interest rates have been down. It's very easy to get into this business, and so it's just important that we keep that going. So, any additional questions, Gary? Thank you so much. Do you have any other comments, questions that you would like to get?
I just was wondering if you would support $100 or $150 on the vacant building. I could work something in, or we could.
Either one.
Yeah, any. I just think not 250 to be exactly them. I was thinking around 150 to 2 in my mind.
Okay. Should we 150? Does everybody think 150? I want to give them something to work with. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much. Does anyone from the council have any other questions? Sorry to keep everyone, but good topic. Staff, anything? No? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.